This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate first part of What If Naruto Was Unalived by Sasuke during Sasuke Retrieval arc. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Valley of the End, World of Shinobi, 3 years prior to the present. More than a century ago, Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju engaged in a legendary battle in this valley on the border of the lands of fire and sound. The two shinobi who fought here are permanently etched into the valley by the two statues that line the waterfall that flows through it. Two other shinobi were engaged in a last-ditch battle here, in the shadow of these renowned fighters. These two shinobi were Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki. Sasuke attempted to kill his best friend in order to obtain the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan, but the manipulations occurring around him had poisoned his mind. Meanwhile, Naruto was making a valiant effort to prevent Sasuke from departing Konoha to join Orochimaru, a vile shinobi who desired to use Sasuke's body for his own. However, as their battle came to a head, Naruto had to use more force because he was unable to persuade his best friend to change his ways. Sasuke was ready to use his curse mark, Enhanced Chidori, while Naruto was ready to use his Kyuubi, Enhanced Rasengan. The statues of the renowned Konoha founders suffered significant damage as their jutsus collided and then exploded as Naruto and Sasuke were fully charged at each other. The explosion knocked Sasuke back, causing him to collide with the statue of Madara before collapsing to the ground, critically injured and still alive but unconscious. Tragically, fate did not treat Naruto well. Sasuke's Chidori pierced his heart, and he was thrown into the lake below, his body further paralyzed by the electricity from the lighting style jutsu. As he descended farther into the lake, he could hardly hear the Kyuubi's voice as he appeared in front of the beast's cage. The tailed beast screamed, "Wake up, you fool! We're dying!" The Kyuubi's attempt to rally his Jinchuriki was ineffective, though, because Naruto's was too serious for even him to heal. Before Kyuubi could respond, Naruto said something that startled the tailed beast. "You know as well as I do that we're already dead, Kyuubi," Naruto said. "I was hoping to do something about your hatred someday as well. I guess that's now going to be impossible, however. I'm sorry, Kyuubi, for letting you down," the dying ninja said, leaving the Kyuubi in a state of shock. Aside from the fact that Naruto's eyes were as serious as ever, the Kyuubi wouldn't have believed what his Jinchuriki had just said. As the darkness engulfed him and Naruto, the Kyuubi remarked, "Normally I would have accused someone who said that of lying to me. For some reason, however, I can tell that you're being honest with me. Sighs. Maybe if we had survived that might have succeeded. I wanted to ask you something, Kyuubi, and since we're dying I might as well ask it now. Do you have a real name?" Naruto responded. The Kyuubi were taken aback because no one had ever considered asking for his name since the Sage of the Six Paths time. As the last of his life and Naruto's dissolved, he said, "Since you're not as bad as I thought, I guess I can tell you. My name is Kurama," but not before Naruto made a remark about the tailed beast's name. As he waited for the afterlife, Naruto remarked, "So your name is Kurama, huh? I think it suits you. Sighs. Farewell, Kurama," not realizing that he and Kurama would not be so easily parted. Hospital Konoha. In the interim, after discovering Sasuke's unconscious body in the Valley of End, Kakashi had just returned him to Konoha. Since he had not seen Naruto, he had assumed that the Kyuubi would heal him and bring him back to Konoha in a few hours. While a group of medical professionals, led by Tsunade, treated Sasuke for injuries that were almost fatal, Kakashi was attempting to soothe Sakura, who had just arrived at the hospital and had shocked her sensei with her response. She was upset. Not at Naruto, though. "How could you leave Naruto alone like that, Kakashi? Sensei. You saw what he had to do just to stop Sasuke from leaving. He's probably badly hurt now as well," Sakura screamed. "Sasuke was the only one I found, Sakura. I wouldn't worry him, though. His wounds have always healed quickly, so he probably won't be gone for no more than a couple of hours," Kakashi assured his squad member. However, he failed to mention that Naruto wouldn't return for several years, and even then, only for a short while. Naruto's parents, Minato and Kushina, welcomed him to the Soul Society shortly after he passed away. They had sensed their son's presence when they felt Kurama's power. The tailed beast was still attached to Naruto's soul, and he was shocked, and oddly relieved, to discover that Kurama was still inside of him. Naruto quickly fulfilled his promise to Kurama, gaining his trust and, as a side effect, gaining complete control of his abilities. Naruto made the decision to become a Shinigami himself and enrolled in the Shino Academy after he reunited with the third Hokage and met a number of other shinobi, all of whom had become Shinigami. A.N. The complete list of shinobi in the Gode 13, along with their respective ranks, can be seen at the end of this chapter. When Naruto learned that he was regarded as a prodigy there, and reportedly the best one the Gode 13 had yet, he was taken aback. However, he was also pleased that no one gave a damn about his status as a Jinchuriki and that he was not subjected to the same prejudices that he had to face in Konoha. He was able to fulfill his potential as a Shinigami and make friends more readily as a result. Because of his strength and abilities, Naruto was able to graduate from the academy in just 1 year. After joining the 13th Division, his captain, Jashiro Yukitake, chose to make the blonde his lieutenant, making Naruto the division's first lieutenant since Kai and Shiba's death. When they finally showed up, 18 months later, Naruto was in this situation. Barracks, Seireiti, Soul Society, 6th Division. The present moment. Gikuya Kuchiki's rigorous adherence to the law meant that the small prison cell in the barracks was rarely empty. However, the person currently incarcerated in the cell was a unique instance, as it was none other than Gikuya's younger sister. Law. Rukia. Renji Aburai, a longtime friend of the adopted Kuchiki family, was becoming irritated with her remarks regarding his recent promotion to lieutenant of the 6th Division. Rukia said, "Do a good job, Lieutenant. You're very strong, Lieutenant. You have weird eyebrows, Lieutenant," while Renji gripped the cell's bars in frustration. Renji said, "That's it, damn it. Let me at her, I'm gonna," until he and Rukia both felt a huge, known surge of Ryotsu come toward them. Renji's face went white as he realized what that meant. Rukia said, maybe you should run, Renji, fully aware of the person who had caused the Ryotsu. Following his friend's advice, Renji started running in the direction of the only door leading into and out of the prison room. However, it was too late for him to do so, as the door abruptly flew off its hinges and struck the cell's bars before shattering into millions of pieces. The sound of the culprit's voice made Renji wince. The voice roared, "Tattoo. Brows," as the individual rushed into the cell, and directly at Renji. Renji begged, "Please calm down, Naruto. I swear I can explain," before the lieutenant from the 13th Division silenced him with a kick to the face. As he took Renji by the Shiakusho and shook him until he was nearly unconscious, Naruto screamed, "You went to arrest Rukia and attacked her. You think you can just explain that way?" Normally, he and Renji were close friends and practically brothers. However, after learning of Renji's actions during Rukia's arrest, Naruto's temper, which has become legendary over the past year and a half along with many of his other traits, was let loose. Although he did not lose his temper frequently, if no one from the shinobi world or at least a close friend was around, there was little anyone could do to stop him when it did. Fortunately for Renji, Rukia was present. "Please stop it, Naruto. It's not worth hurting Renji," Rukia begged in an attempt to get her commanding officer involved, who released Renji, who was severely bruised. Up to her cell, Naruto ran. Naruto asked her, clearly worried, "Rukia, are you hurt?" Rukia remarked, "I'm alright, Naruto. Just a little down, that's all," reflecting on her lieutenant's intensely protective personality. He was always this way with his squad members, like a shepherd to his flock. He was deeply worried about the security and welfare of the 13th Division members, and Rukia, who knew her lieutenant all too well, knew that even if he was moved to another division for any reason, that concern would still exist. Naruto nodded, but Renji was able to stand up before he could say anything. Renji sighed as Naruto said, "Naruto, I know you're upset, and I'm really sorry for what I did, but can you at least let me speak to Rukia in peace?" Still smoldering from his most recent outburst, Naruto threatened, "Okay, but the next time something like this happens again, tattoo. Brows. I swear to Kami you'll be face down on the ground eating bricks faster than you can say, tailed beast." When Naruto said, "In any case, I have to report to old man Yukitake right now so I'll come back to check on you later, Rukia," both Rukia and Renji nodded. Naruto was reminded of his father's warning earlier in the day as he was leaving the 6th Division barracks, when his captain had asked him to run a few errands. Although it wasn't really necessary, Minato warned him, "I didn't want to tell you this just yet, but now it seems that the time to wait has finally passed. Keep a close eye on my captain whenever you're in his presence, as I fear this is his doing." The shinobi turned Shinigami, referred to as Shinobigami by many of their peers, had suspected Aizen of plotting something with Ichimaru and Tosen, in contrast to the other Gode 13. They had even discovered the true nature of Aizen's Zanpakuto, which further damaged his reputation among the Shinobigami. Even the thick-headed Naruto sensed that something was amiss with those three captains. Kurama and his Zanpakuto shared Naruto's suspicions, demonstrating how inadequate Aizen's mask was. However, the shinobi kept their suspicions to themselves until they could establish any wrongdoing on the part of the three captains, since they had managed to fool the other members of the Gode 13. The thought of the 5th Division captain made Naruto clench his fist as he ran to his barracks. Naruto thought to himself, for your sake, Aizen, this better not have anything to do with you, not realizing that the one person Aizen was most interested in was still planning a risky operation into the very center of the Soul Society. Barracks, 13th Division, Seirei, over a week later. As he had done every day since he had gone to see Rukia, Naruto had woken up before dawn because he had too much on his mind to sleep. Naruto was sitting on the roof of this barracks, watching the sunrise, and it had already been a difficult week since Rukia's arrest. After his friend was sentenced to death, he and Byakuya had a heated argument that almost ended in violence, despite the fact that they had never really agreed on anything before. This gap had only widened since Rukia's arrest, with only Naruto's parents, Captain Yukitake, and Shisui Uchiha able to prevent the two Shinigami from attempting to kill each other. Byakuya had found Naruto's lack of formality and even greater lack of respect for authority figures unacceptable, while Naruto actively hated Byakuya for his poor treatment of his subordinates and, most importantly, for putting the law even above his own family. The arrival of 5 intruders, among whom Rukia had lost her powers, in the Rukongai sector of the Soul Society and their attempt to enter the Seirei were the last thoughts on Naruto's mind. He was particularly conflicted about how to feel about that man, whom Rukia kept referring to as Ichigo. Although this Ichigo was partly to blame for Rukia's situation, Naruto believed that he genuinely cared for his friends because he was now a member of the Soul Society and was probably attempting to save Rukia. Naruto felt a familiar Ryotsu come toward him as he considered his next move. Naruto said, "Good morning, Shisui. Sensei. How are you feeling?" to the Uchiha, who had served as his mentor since graduation and had taught him abilities that the instructors at the Shino Academy were unable to impart. "I'm alright, Naruto. I was actually going to ask you the same thing. Both of your parents and Captain Yukitake are worried about you since you haven't been getting much sleep recently," said Shisui. This remark caused Naruto to sigh. "I've just had a lot on my mind recently, that's all," Naruto replied. Because of his time spent as Naruto's master, Shisui was able to determine which specific thought was currently occupying Naruto's thoughts. "You should wait until the intruders enter the Seirei first if you plan to confront them," Shisui said. The Uchiha knew that Naruto was going to confront these intruders, no matter what anyone tried to persuade him otherwise, because the blonde likely thought that by confronting them, he might find the answer to a question that must have been bothering him. As the sun started to rise, Naruto and Shisui noticed a tiny light appear in the skies above the Seirei. "I know, Sensei, but I've never been the most patient guy and every day I wait is a day closer to Rukia's," Naruto said. To the surprise of both Shinobigami, the light seemed to approach the Shinigami's house more and more until it struck the soul shield membrane enclosing the Seirei. For a few moments, the membrane kept the tiny light contained. Then, to the surprise of Naruto and the other Shinigami, the light burst through the barrier and, after about a minute, split into 4 streaks that started to descend to the city below. Even before the barrier was broken, everyone in the Seirei understood what this meant. Naruto had already started toward the closest light, which Shisui believed to be one of the intruders, before he even realized it. After learning the layout of the underground network a few months earlier, Naruto thought, "It looks like they've finally arrived. It's time to see what kind of person you truly are, Ichigo Kurosaki," as he entered the closest sewer entrance to approach the intruders covertly. Seirei underground sewer system, after a few hours. Because a handful of Shinigami, primarily from the 4th Division, knew the layout of the vast underground network, it was hardly used. The 2 intruders, who are referred to as Ryoka by the majority of the other Shinigami, who were pursuing one of these individuals, a young man named Hanataro Yamada, were what made this incursion noteworthy. A man with short orange hair and a Soul Reaper Shiakusho was one of these intruders who approached Hanataro. "Hey, Hanataro, can I ask you something?" he said. Hanataro hesitated a moment before responding with a nod. "When you talked about how there aren't many other Shinigami that knew their way around these sewers, you looked like you were going to add something to what you were saying before I interrupted you. Could you tell me what you were going to say?" he inquired. "Well, there have been stories over the past few months, Ichigo. Apparently some of the other members of the 4th Division claim that they have seen another Shinigami walking through the sewers. They claim that the person is not of the 4th Division though, as of right now, none of them have been able to get a good look at the person to positively identify them," Hanataro explained. Both Ichigo and the other intruder, a man from the Rukongai region named Ganji Shiba, secretly hoped that the person was either a hoax or that, if they were real, they wouldn't be in the sewer at the moment. Apparently, this would not be the case. A voice from the shadows said, "Why don't we change that, then, since I'm here now," and Ichigo and the others came to a halt. As Zanjetsu answered the voice, Ichigo held him tightly, ready to battle whoever this opponent might be. When Zangetsu was unsheathed, Ichigo asked, "Who the hell are you?" He glanced at the path ahead because it seemed to be the source of the voice. After recognizing the voice, Hanataro fainted because he knew exactly why the person was there. Hanataro questioned in horror, "It can't be. You're the one who's been using the sewer passages." And the person replied in the affirmative. Ichigo had had enough of this person's mental games and had reached the end of his patience. Ichigo ordered, "Show yourself, damn it," and the person sighed. The person said, "You don't have to tell me that. I was going to do that anyways," and soon after, one of the fluorescent light bulbs that provided the subterranean network with dim lighting revealed their appearance to the three would.be rescuers. It was a man with blue eyes and short, spiky blonde hair, about Ichigo's age but slightly shorter than him. He was wearing a typical Shiakusho, which included a black headband with a metal plate with the kanji for Shinobi sewn onto it, a black armband with some kind of badge around his left sleeve, and an orange sash around his waist. He had his Zanpakuto sheathed and fastened to his sash, a katana with an orange hilt and a red spiral, patterned tsuba. But the first thing Ichigo thought was strange were the 6 whisker-like marks on the man's face, 3 on each cheek, which gave him the appearance of a fox. The enormous amount of reiatsu that radiated from this man was the second, and more significant, factor that set him apart from the other Shinigami Ichigo had previously come across. It was more than Ichigo had ever experienced in his brief tenure as a Shinigami. The mystery guy looked at Ichigo, and he braced himself for what he believed would be the hardest battle he had yet to face. Ichigo questioned, "Who are you?" As he responded, the man indicated his headband with his right thumb. His announcement startled Ganju and Ichigo. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki, lieutenant of the 13th Division," he said. "How the hell can a lieutenant have so much reiatsu? I had a feeling that the lieutenants were no pushover, but this is ridiculous," said Ganju. Ichigo also felt this way because the orange-haired Shinigami had previously engaged in combat with a lieutenant, in this case Renji Aburai, and even he, with his poor senses, could tell that the man in front of him was now on a different plane, a different planet even. Why was this man in the same rank as another lieutenant if his power was so much greater? Naruto said, "That's enough about me, though," turning back to Ichigo. "Because all the spots for captain are already taken, plus I haven't achieved one of the major requirements yet." He asked, "Are you Ichigo Kurosaki? The one that Rukia talked about?" Which startled Ichigo, who hesitated to answer. Ichigo said, "I guess I am. What's it to you?" And Naruto sighed in response. With the appearance of ignoring Ichigo's query, Naruto questioned, "Why are you here? Is it perhaps to save her?" Ichigo's voice betrayed his annoyance as he said, "Yes, I am, and I just asked you, why does it matter to you?" Naruto stunned Ichigo with his response, "It matters to me because Rukia and I are in the same division, Yubaka," but before Ichigo could respond, Naruto went on. "Based on what Rukia told me, I have a feeling that you and I are alike in many ways. Size. Unlike you, however, I still don't know what to do about her execution. That's why I'm going to put you to the test. To see if you're truly strong enough to save her. I think that if I do that, then I can answer that question," said Naruto. At this moment, Ganju approached Ichigo, who was standing a short distance from Naruto. The Shiba clansman began, "He might be laying a trap for us, Ichigo. How can we be certain he isn't lying?" But Ichigo interrupted him. "I can already tell you that he isn't lying to us, Ganju. If he had wanted to defeat us, he could have done it the moment he spotted us. Even I could tell that the difference in our powers is just too great. If he wanted to simply end our rescue, he could have knocked us out before we knew what happened. He's pretty good at concealing his reiatsu. Instead he confronted his head. On, so I'm willing to take a leap of faith here," Ichigo said as he concentrated on Naruto. The lieutenant smirked when he asked, "What's this little test you have in mind?" "It's nothing too complicated. All you have to do is fight me. You don't have to beat, though. All you have to do is wound me once. It doesn't even have to be a serious wound, though we'll both be using what powers we need in order to win. If you can do that, then you've passed. Any questions?" Naruto said as he took out his Zanpakuto. Ichigo exclaimed, "What are we waiting for? Let's do this, Naruto Uzumaki," as he and Naruto charged at one another. Their blades soon came into contact with one another, indicating that the two Shinigami had started fighting. Ganju and Hanataro watched with their faces displaying the shock they were experiencing as Naruto and Ichigo battled in the sewers beneath the Seirei. Ganju was astounded to witness Naruto's power display, although it was evident that the blonde-haired Shinigami was only employing a quarter of his strength. He was obviously defeating his opponent, who appeared to have been struck by a freight train, while Naruto had not yet sustained any injuries. However, after 20 minutes, Hanataro was astounded that Ichigo had not been defeated by Naruto. When Naruto defended him from a few members of the 11th Division who had been harassing him, Hanataro had seen firsthand what the former shinobi could do with that kind of strength. Given that Naruto was currently fighting with strength comparable to that of a captain, Ichigo's ability to defeat him was nothing short of miraculous. Even though Ichigo had put the orange-haired Shinigami on the defensive, Naruto was also impressed by his strength. Everyone else would have lost a fight against him in the first few minutes, except for his fellow Shinobigami and the captains he faced when they attempted to measure it. As a result of having to use both his Kido and Shunpo against Ichigo, the whatif rescuer was able to exhaust Naruto significantly in addition to Ichigo's ability to continue fighting him. Before the blonde could finish his attack, Ichigo abruptly swung Zangetsu as Naruto's chest. Naruto took a moment to observe Ichigo's enormous amount of Ryotsu before pointing his right index finger at Ichigo as he Shunpo'd once more. Naruto claimed to have created a concentrated lightning bolt, Hado-4, Byakurai, which he then unleashed at Ichigo. Naruto appeared above the orange-haired person, allowing him to avoid the attack. "You're not bad, Ichigo, but you're going to have to try harder than that," Naruto remarked bluntly as he struck Ichigo's head with his Zanpakuto. "I'm not finished just yet, Naruto Uzumaki, so don't act as if I am already beaten. You may be much stronger than I am, but I won't give up. I have to rescue Rukia, and if that means passing this little test of yours, then I will do it," Ichigo responded to Naruto's remark. Although Naruto was aware that Ichigo wasn't finished, he was attempting to show the human how strong he was. To the surprise of the former shinobi, Ichigo stopped moving and put his Zanpakuto on Naruto's shoulders after blocking his slash. Hanataro and Ganju were also surprised by Ichigo's actions, so Naruto wasn't the only one who was perplexed. As Ichigo stood there motionless, Ganju asked himself, what the hell is Ichigo doing? Since the underground sewers were located so far below the surface that only those in the passages would have felt this surge in power, Hanataro exclaimed, Are you okay, Ichig? Wahhhhh. As a sudden and enormous burst of Ryotsu radiated throughout the area. The former shinobi's eyes widened as Ichigo's eyes suddenly glowed a light blue, and Naruto watched as Ichigo turned his glare towards him. Ichigo said, "I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but now it's time to show you my resolve, Naruto Uzumaki," as Naruto gave him a startled look before grinning. As he readied himself to avoid the impending attack, Naruto thought to himself, "Resolve, huh? So it is your will that's helped you through all this?" The Shinobigami was taken aback when Ichigo raised his enormous blade. Even though he was only 20 feet away from the blonde, it appeared as though he was going to slash at Naruto with the blade aimed at the ceiling. Then, to Naruto's surprise, Ichigo swung his Zanpakuto, unleashing a huge beam of Ryotsu. Before anyone could notice, the beam reached Naruto, who abruptly disappeared behind the light created by Ichigo's attack. The attack eventually subsided after a short while, leaving behind a column of smoke and a canyon, like chasm on the hallway floor. Ichigo watched as his breathing grew labored and slow. Ichigo asked himself, "Did I get him that time?" As he collapsed to his knees, his wounds and fatigue finally catching up with him. Although Ichigo assumed Naruto had survived the attack, he wasn't certain if he had been able to completely escape the onslaught. Ichigo and his two friends were watching the smoke column slowly dissipate when they heard Naruto say something that startled them all. "You something else, Ichigo, you know that? You actually managed to wound me," Naruto remarked as the smoke finally cleared enough for the three whatif rescuers to see what had transpired. What Ichigo and Ganju were witnessing was unbelievable. Naruto appeared to be unharmed as he stood in front of them, but it was difficult to tell because the Shinobigami's whole body was now covered in what seemed to be a Ryotsu shroud, which took the shape of flickering yellow flames. A larger Magatama appeared on the shroud where it encased Naruto's abdomen, and the round circle of the larger bead-like image was odd in and of itself, resembling a spiral pattern of some kind. Naruto was now wearing what appeared to be a necklace made of Magatama beads. Along with the shroud, Naruto's hair had been spiked up, with the two shortest locks now resembling horns. As a last alteration to his appearance, Naruto's eyes had turned orange instead of blue. Even though Ichigo had already collapsed to his knees before this form, the increase in Ryotsu that accompanied the appearance change was too much for him to handle without being pinned to the ground. Naruto just activated his chakra mode, KCM, in 9 Tails, Kyubi. Surprisingly, Ichigo's shock wasn't caused by Naruto's altered appearance or strength. In response to Ichigo's statement, "Why are you still unscathed? I thought you said that I wounded you," Naruto sighed. "You did wound me, Baka. If I hadn't unleashed this form when I did, that wound would have actually been fatal, Naruto clarified. To everyone's surprise, Naruto then dispersed the form he had assumed, reversing the appearance change in the power boost. Ichigo, Ganju, and particularly Hanataro were shocked to discover that Naruto was indeed hurt when the KCM dispersed. The blonde-haired Shinigami had a slash wound that extended from his left shoulder to what seemed to be just inches above his heart and main blood vessels. If his smirk was any indication, Ichigo understood what that wound meant. Ichigo remarked, "I guess I passed your little test, Naruto," as his two friends stood up again. Naruto said, "So you did, Ichigo," and gestured for Hanataro to tend to the orange-haired Shinigami. Hanataro looked at Naruto's wound as he started to tend to a reluctant Kurosaki. When Naruto saw Yamada's worried expression, he waved it away. "You don't have to worry about me, Hanataro. You should already know that this wound will probably be healed in a few minutes anyways, so focus your attention to Ichigo," Naruto said. The former shinobi then focused on Ganju and the somehow aware Ichigo, noticing that both of them had confused expressions on their faces. Naruto sighed when the two men nodded, realizing that this would take some time. "I suppose this would be the best time for an explanation about who I am and what I'm going to do now. Am I right?" he asked. After 2 hours, Naruto had just finished explaining everything to Ichigo and Ganju, and he was now making his way to the sewer entrance, which was directly next to his division's barracks. Naruto told the group about himself, including a little bit about his past life because all of the Shinobigami did remember their past, and about the existence of the Shinobigami after they agreed not to discuss anything he said to them after he left. The former shinobi then consented to allow Ichigo and his friends to continue their efforts to save Rukia. Because of his conflict with Kurosaki, Naruto even consented to assist the intruders in their rescue. But because of the dubious nature of Rukia's execution, Naruto informed the group that he would not be joining them and that it would be preferable if he enlisted the assistance of the other Shinobigami. Ichigo was dubious about Naruto's assertion, but after a few minutes he gave in. Naruto left after spending a few more minutes explaining his plans to the group. He had promised to meet with Ichigo and his friends, including those who weren't there, after Rukia was saved. Even though he was aware that Rukia's sentence might have been manipulated, Naruto chose not to inform Ichigo of these sinister plans just yet because he lacked concrete evidence. Naruto made the decision to ask his father to call a meeting of the other Shinobigami so that they could discuss the situation and decide how to proceed. Although the group of former shinobi had not yet determined whether they would have to forcibly halt the execution, Naruto didn't have to worry about the possibility that any of them would refuse to assist because they had been planning to deal with this situation anyhow. When Naruto eventually arrived at the ladder that led to the sewer entrance, he took stock of the events of the day. His opponent was particularly on his mind, a reflection that his inner entities did not ignore. From inside his head, a voice he recognized told him, "Naruto, he is a lot like you, just like Rukia said." "I guess he is, Kurama, though I'm shocked that his powers are still growing even now. To think that he's already at the level that he is makes me wonder if he even knows how much potential," said Naruto. Another mocking voice said, "Says the kid who is already at the level where he can obtain Bankai yet refuses to do so," which caused a huge vein to appear out of Naruto's forehead. The same voice sighed at what Naruto said. "Are you seriously going to bring that up? I thought that we agreed to honor my dad's request to wait for that until a Shinobigami have dealt with that Sankei Aizen and his two lackeys," Naruto said in a frustrated tone. "We did agree to that, Naruto. But let's imagine for a moment that Aizen is the one responsible for this entire ordeal and that he finally make his move against the Soul Society. Even though you're able to see past his illusions, your Shikai isn't going to be enough to deal with him. If you really want to save Rukia, you're going to have to make that decision. And it has to be made now, Naruto," said the voice. Kurama interrupted Naruto as he was about to sigh at this lecture. The tailed beast concurred, saying, "This guy may irritate me every time we talk, Naruto, but he does have a point. You've always known how to push my buttons, don't you?" Kamikaze. Translation. Divine Wind. I guess I shouldn't be surprised since you are my Zanpakuto. Sighs. You do realize that I already know all of this, right? Because I know all of that already. I was going to tell you as well as Kurama that I plan to finally begin my Bankai training after I have this meeting with the others, said Naruto. This startled both of his internal residents, but they were unable to respond before Naruto went on. I promised my dad that I would wait a bit before I began that training. If Aizen is the one who's responsible for Rukia's sentence, however, I can't afford to wait any longer. I'm going to need that power to deal with that man, so I'm going to ask Shisui Sensei to help me with my training, which I plan to begin tonight. As for my dad, as long as it actually helps us in stopping Aizen, what he doesn't know won't hurt him, right? Naruto clarified. As Kamikaze started to ascend the ladder out of the sewers, the former shinobi could tell that he was grinning after hearing all of this. After 4 hours, as he and the other lieutenants waited for the 4th Division officer who was supposed to provide the most recent information on Ichigo and the other intruders' situation 2 hours ago, Naruto was growing impatient. Naruto first went to his room in the 13th Division after exiting the subterranean sewers to change into a different Shiakusho in order to avoid raising suspicions due to the tear that his previous uniform now had. He went to look for his father after getting dressed and putting his Zanpakuto in his room. Although he was able to locate his father at the 5th Division barracks and persuade him to call a meeting with the other Shinobigami, a Hell Butterfly arrived with orders for all lieutenants to report to their assembly area to get the most recent information on the Ryoka invasion, before Naruto or Minato could even search for the others. Haku, Fugaku, and Hiruzen arrived at the meeting room shortly after Naruto and his father did. Minato was able to tell the three about Naruto's encounter with Ichigo and the meeting they would have before the other lieutenants, with the exception of 11th Division Lieutenant Yachiru Kusajishi, arrived. Naruto was speaking with Rangaku Matsumoto, the lieutenant of the 10th Division, and Fallen Renji while the lieutenants awaited the report. When Naruto said, "I guess I can't say I'm surprised. This Ichigo guy sounds way too much like myself and my predecessor Kaien." After all, he made sure to pretend that he had not yet met Kurosaki. As he escorted Rukia to the Senzaikyu, Renji had just told Naruto about the conversation he had with her. The part that Naruto was reacting to was the part where Rukia reacted to learning that Ichigo was still alive. "That may be true, Naruto, but I doubt he has as much skill as either of you," replied Rangaku. The 3 lieutenants turned around and were shocked to see that Fugaku had responded. "I wouldn't be too sure of that, Lieutenant Matsumoto," said another voice. "These intruders were able to defeat Jidanbo, survived an encounter with Captain Ichimaru, and were able to breach the soul shield membrane. We have to assume that they're all very strong and very dangerous if they have already caused this much trouble," the former head of the Uchiha clan explained, shocking Matsumoto and Ranji by keeping everything he now knew a secret. Fugaku nodded in response to Rangaku's question, "Do you really think the Ryoka are that much of a threat?" As if on cue, a man appeared at the assembly room door. "Of course I'm sure that the officer from the 4th Division will now prove my point," Fugaku said. The man said, "3rd seat of the 4th Division Yasukika Ayamura, reporting," but before he could finish, Naruto used 2 sentences to inform the 3rd seat of his presence. As Renji tried to restrain him, Naruto roared in a tone that was obviously agitated, "You're late. You better have a good reason for that, or you can kiss your sorry ass goodbye." The former shinobi already had too little time to waste on these reports, and this officer had made matters worse. Ayamura's face turned pale as he made an effort to avoid inadvertently or intentionally upsetting the lieutenant anymore. The 3rd seat hadn't witnessed the Uzumaki lose his temper firsthand, but he had heard enough tales to know that he didn't want to offend Naruto. That is, if he wasn't already there. "My apologies, Lieutenant Uzumaki. I was delayed due to some last-minute updates of great importance," Ayamura said. After Renji helped him to relax, Naruto arched an eyebrow when he heard the final portion of the 3rd-seated officer's explanation. Naruto pondered, what could be so damned important that could have forced us to wait 2 hours more than we were supposed to? Ayamura started reading the report he was holding right away, so he knew he would get his answer soon enough. After 5 minutes, Ayamura briefed the lieutenants on the portion of the report that dealt with the events that had occurred today as of right now. The preliminary reports appeared to suggest that the entire 11th Division, with the exceptions of Captain Kenpachi Zaraki, Lieutenant Yachiru Kusajishi, and the 4th-seated officer Zabuza Momochi, was completely wiped out, he said. The first few minutes of the report were essentially a summary of what had happened this morning, which naturally irritated a number of the officers. But when Ayamura informed the lieutenants about the defeats of the 3rd-seated officer Akaku Madarame and the 5th-seated officer Yumachika Yasugawa, both of whom were from the 11th Division, the atmosphere changed. It was shocking enough that Ryoka had defeated 2 high-ranking officers, but defeating a whole division. It was not shocking how some of the lieutenants responded to this bit of news. The 3rd Division's lieutenant, Izuru Kira, exclaimed, "That's impossible." Renji exclaimed, "The 11th Division is gone?" Since Ichigo was one of the intruders and had a close relationship with his former division, it was reasonable that he was suddenly feeling angry. "How were these Ryoka able to do so much damage in just a few hours?" exclaimed Lieutenant Shojiro Sasaki of the 1st Division. Even though they didn't express it aloud, the Shinobigami viewed the division's defeat more critically than their fellow lieutenants, even though they felt terrible for all the members of the 11th Division who were now dead. Fugaku asked himself rhetorically. They charged headfirst into battle against an enemy without knowing who they were dealing with. What did they expect would happen? The 11th division is even more poorly disciplined than I imagined. I guess this also proves that Naruto was right about Kurosaki, though, Minato was thinking to himself. Haku shook his head and recalled that Zabuza had expressed his disapproval of his own division. Master Zabuza always said that the members of his division were all talk, minus Captain Zaraki, he thought. Hiruzen's current thought was, honestly, did they really want to start a war that badly? Naruto sighed, thinking, and people call me an idiot. I almost feel sorry for Zabuza since he has to deal with those dumbasses every day. After putting these ideas aside, they resumed listening to the report, and the lieutenants returned to their individual barracks as Ayamura concluded. Unknown location in the Seireiti for Shinobigami meeting. In the evening, sometime. By most standards, this secret chamber was a small space. It was essentially semi-spherical, with a two-story ceiling made of solid bedrock and a small stone urn in the middle where a fire had been burning. Naruto and the other 8 shinobi were standing in a circle inside this room. They had already concluded talking about the events that transpired between Naruto and the intruders earlier that day and the course of action they would now follow. Since he had proposed the meeting, Naruto was essentially in charge of what the Shinobigami were going to do next. So that's the plan. Any questions? He asked. When no one responded, Minato made the decision to end the meeting by asking his son a crucial question so that everyone could get ready for their plans. Minato inquired, Naruto, were you able to retrieve it? It was a pain to go through with it and I'm sure Rukia is going to kill me when she finds out, but that creep Mayuri was able to help me obtain it. I made sure that he wouldn't say anything about what happened until this is all over. I'll give it to old man Yama at that point, Naruto said, as his dad nodded. Minato concluded the meeting by saying, I guess that's it, then. Everyone started to move in the direction of the exit after that, aside from Naruto. Shisui froze in place as Naruto waited for everyone to depart before asking his mentor if he could assist him with his Bankai training. Wait, Shisui. Sensei. Can I ask you something before you go? Naruto said. Shisui was surprised by this abrupt change in direction. Although Naruto had been more than capable of learning Bankai for a while, he had not even tried it because his father had asked him to wait, which Naruto had complied with up until that point. Shisui said, are you sure you want to do that, Naruto? I'm sure Minato is going to protest, but Naruto cut him off. Then I won't tell Dad that I'm trying to obtain my Bankai. You know that we're going to have used everything we have to stop that damned Aizen. You said that you discovered a secret training area near Sokyoku Hill so we can use that place to train, said Naruto. Shisui sighed at this. The Uchiha surmised that Naruto was now taking this very seriously and would not accept no if he felt compelled to do so, since Rukia was now an unwilling pawn in Aizen's schemes. I guess I can help you since it appears that you're not going to take no for an answer. Understand, however, that I'm only. You do remember what my explanation about how one obtains his or her Bankai, right? Shisui reminded him and Naruto nodded. Very well, then, I guess I'll help you out. We should wait until tomorrow, however, as you still have that lieutenant's meeting in the morning, said Shisui. Naruto moaned when he recalled that. He was still growing weary of meetings, even though his sensei was correct to advise him to wait for that one because there wouldn't be any more. As he and his sensei departed the meeting room for the evening, Naruto reflected, with all these pointless meetings, I'm amazed that everyone else is surprised that Ichigo and his friends have evaded capture. Sokyoku Hill, secret training area, at noon on the following day. Naruto remarked, somewhat astounded by the size of the location. I wonder would go out of their way to see a place this big hidden from everyone else right below the execution grounds. As Shisui said, I sometimes wonder about the same thing, though I guess that's a moot point, his longtime pupil nodded. In any case, we need to get started, since that Snake Aizen is probably going to make his move at any moment, Naruto stated. He and the other former shinobi were aware that they were running out of time to thwart Aizen's schemes. The Seireiti had been even more chaotic the night and morning following the meeting. Numerous events had occurred during that period, but the Seireiti's tension reached intolerable heights after Renji lost to Ichigo and was given permission to use his Zanpakuto. While most of the other Shinigami were simply devastated by the loss of Aizen, particularly Momo Hinamori, the 5th Division 4th seated officer, the former shinobi knew that this meant that Aizen had started to make his move. Then there was Aizen's murder, which only made the anxiety in the air worse for everyone. Knowing that they would soon have to face Aizen's subordinates, Naruto quickly left the escalating chaos at the scene of Aizen's murder to go look for Shisui. Once Naruto told the Uchiha what had happened, they both went to the hidden training room, stepping as fast as they could to ensure no one was pursuing them. After dismissing these thoughts, Shisui issued one last warning to Naruto. Before we begin Naruto, I want that you understand this very well. Even though we still have 8 days until Rukia's execution, there's still a chance that Aizen might try to push up the date much sooner than that. So to be safe, I'm going to give you until this midnight to subjugate your Zanpakuto second longer. If you can't do it by that time, you'll just have to confront without a Bankai, Shisui stated, ensuring that his pupil comprehended what he was saying. When his sensei warned Naruto, he just grinned. Then I'll just have to obtain my Bankai before then, Naruto confidently replied. Although he was a little taken aback by the limited amount of time he would have, he understood that by using this time to train, he was already pushing his and Rukia's luck enough, so he would just need to make the most of what time he had. Naruto nodded before drawing his blade. Very well, then, start by activating your Shikai, Shisui said, setting a timer for midnight. Naruto chanted, "Open the floodgates, kamikaze," while launching his Zanpakuto into the air with the tip pointing upward. The blade then came to a halt in midair when a tiny cloud appeared overhead. The cloud grew larger and darker over a few seconds, eventually becoming a small thunderstorm that was a couple hundred yards across. A very strong lightning bolt struck Naruto's blade, which was still floating in midair, as soon as the cloud reached this size. The blade dropped into Naruto's grasp as the light burst, revealing Kamikaze's Shikai form. The blade had been compressed into the shape of a Chikuto sword, the kind of sword used by Sasuke in Naruto Shippuden, which was now a lightning bolt. As Naruto held the blade, tiny gusts of wind were being released. The kanjis for wind, water, and lightning were now inscribed on a tiny yellow tag that was fastened to the hilt's base. Naruto asked, trying to control the intermittent outburst of wind from his blade, "Now what, Shisui, sensei?" "Have the spirit of Kamikaze materialize. I'll use my Ryatsu to help maintain it long enough for you to try to subjugate him," Shisui explained. Naruto could only keep the spirit of Kamikaze materialized for a few hours without assistance because he had only recently learned how to do so Shisui would keep the Zanpakuto spirit materialized until his student attained Bankai. Or until the clock struck midnight, whichever came first. Without another word, Naruto directed his Ryatsu toward his blade, which in turn produced more light until the training grounds were engulfed in a blaze of illumination. If anyone had been standing on the hill above the hidden room, they would have felt a slight tremor from the explosion's strong shockwave. Fortunately for both Shinobigami, nobody was near enough to Sokyoku Hill to notice anything unusual. Both Naruto and Shisui could hear someone else, who was most likely a man based on the sound of his voice, calling out to them as the blast's light faded and the subsequent thunderclap temporarily impairs hearing. With a tone that was obviously mocking, the voice asked, "Took you long enough to finally do that, don't you think, Lil Naruto?" When Naruto heard his Zanpakuto's nickname for him, a huge vein appeared on his forehead. "For once in your miserable life, Kamikaze, would you stop calling me that stupid nickname?" Naruto exclaimed angrily as Kamikaze's spirit emerged from the fading dust cloud. It was a man, about 6 feet tall and lean, who looked to be in his late teens. Due to the partial influence of Kurama's power, he had blood-red eyes with black slits and spiky black hair that was tied in a ponytail and fell well below his waist. The samurai-like armor that many shinobi wore prior to the establishment of shinobi villages was shaped like Kamikaze's coat of lightning. In addition to this armor, the Zanpakuto wore a red sash around his waist, a black undershirt with sleeves that reached below his elbows, black pants that reached his shins, black shinobi sandals, and a blood-red shinobi headband with a metal plate that featured the stylized leaf symbol of Konoha. In his right hand, he held a blade that was essentially the same pure lighting Chikuto that Naruto would use when wielding his Shikai, but it was a few inches shorter and had a thin rope made of pure lighting attached to the bottom of the hilt instead of a tag. The rope connected the sword to Kamikaze's sash, and because it was made of lightning, it could extend to any length the Zanpakuto spirit wanted. While Kamikaze's insult infuriated Naruto, the Zanpakuto merely grinned at his partner's annoyance. "But I like calling you that. It lets me push your buttons all the more easily, Lil Naruto," Kamikaze responded to the lieutenant's irritation. Naturally, Naruto became even more enraged at his Zanpakuto's actions. The other Kamikaze had no problems with Naruto or even Kurama, in contrast to the Zanpakuto spirits of some Shinigami. However, the Zanpakuto enjoyed causing the Biju and his Jinchuriki a great deal of annoyance in order to elicit a humorous response from both of them. Before the Uzumaki attempted to murder his own Zanpakuto and end his life as a Shinigami, Shisui made the decision to redirect Naruto's focus back to the task at hand. Shisui commanded, "Enough of this nonsense, the both of you," attracting Kamikaze's and Naruto's attention before focusing on the Zanpakuto. "Now then, Kamikaze, Based on your little conversation with Naruto, it's obvious that you already know why you're here and that you've overheard what has been said, so I won't ask. Once I stabilize your materialization, I assume that you can begin right away. Shisui asked the Zanpakuto who had materialized. Yep, was Kamikaze's only response. Following the Zanpakuto's statement, Shisui Shunpyo'd in front of him, put his hand on the spirit's chest, and started channeling some of his Ryotsu into him. After a minute or two, the Uchiha was able to fully stabilize the Zanpakuto's manifestation. Kamikaze apparently caused hundreds of blades, in the shape of the spirit's Shikai, to emerge when Shisui finished the manifested by pressing his left palm into the ground. All of these blades were stuck in the ground vertically as Kamikaze picked them up, but the blade and the rope it was attached to had abruptly disappeared. Now then, Naruto, your challenge is very simple. One of these blades is the true me and is the only one that can defeat me. You have to find it before I can kill you, since I'll attacking you the whole time entire, or before your time runs out, and defeat me with it. Oh, and every time you pick up the wrong blade there's a nasty surprise that'll await you, Kamikaze continued. Naruto shuddered at the last part of the Zanpakuto's explanation because he wasn't very shy about his somewhat dark sense of humor. With a great deal of anxiety, Naruto reached for the nearest blade. And with good reason. He was zapped by the blade as soon as he touched its hilt, but it was good before it vanished. When Naruto's right hand started to feel normal again after a few seconds, he turned to scowl at the beaming Kamikaze. Naruto posed the rhetorical question, "You are a cruel man, you know that?" Kamikaze's statement, now, Lil, Naruto, being a critic isn't going to help you get Bankai any sooner, infuriated his wielder even more. After he was zapped for trying to grab another blade, Naruto turned to face his Zanpakuto, who had just escaped his initial attack. Naruto continued his search for the real Kamikaze, declaring, "When I get my hands on the true you, you're so dead, Kamikaze." Because writing this fight would take too long, especially given the nature of this chapter, I'm going to skip it. Nearly half an hour later, which he accomplished more than 4 hours after the start of the training. Naturally, it had not been an easy task, and it was made even more difficult by the fact that he had to locate the right blade while the manifested Kamikaze was continuously attacking him. But after battling the Zanpakuto spirit for another exhausting hour, Naruto eventually discovered the blade that was Kamikaze's true form. The Uzumaki then used a combination of swordsmanship, a number of Kido spells, and the 9-tailed chakra mode to finally defeat Kamikaze and take his Bankai. The Shinobigami eventually undid his Zanpakuto's manifestation after Kamikaze spent 30 minutes explaining to Naruto the nature of his Bankai. Since the training he had just completed had left him too severely injured for even Kurama to heal his wounds without assistance, he used the special hot spring inside the training area to heal himself with 2 hours before the next scheduled lieutenant's meeting. Naruto turned to Shisui, who had just woken up from a quick nap he had taken while waiting for his student, as he hurriedly dressed himself in another Shiakusho. The Uchiha nodded in response to Naruto's question, "Did you sense those approaching Ryotsus, sensei?" "Yeah, and they're clearly not a members of the Gode 13 whom I'm aware of. Based on the huge amounts of Ryotsu, these two must be with the intruders," Shisui argued. At this, Naruto grinned. Naruto remarked, "Oh, they definitely are, Shisui sensei. After all, I fought one of those two intruders earlier, as the Ryotsu's sources emerged. One of them was a woman with dark skin, slightly over 5 feet tall, with a slim build, golden eyes that resembled cats, and long purple hair that she wore in a ponytail. She wore a pale brown sash around her waist, black stretch pants, light brown shoes, and an orange shirt with what looked to be a black undershirt underneath. However, Naruto's focus was on the other person the woman was carrying on her shoulder, not the woman herself. Ichigo, severely injured and unconscious. Shisui concentrated on the woman while Naruto stood there, stunned by Ichigo's condition. The woman nodded in response to the Uchiha's question, "You must be one of the intruders, correct?" At this, Shisui arched an eyebrow. "Why did you come to this place if there are two potential enemies already here? With your level of power, I'm sure you would have detected us," he was curious about. The Uchiha believed that this woman would not come here when there were two possible threats nearby, even though Shisui could tell from her Ryotsu that she was easily at the level of a captain despite her attempts to conceal it. Rukia couldn't have known that Shisui, Naruto, and the other Shinobigami were planning to assist in her rescue. Or so Shisui believed. The woman just grinned. "Considering the fact that you two haven't attacked me yet, I'm pretty sure that's not the case, especially since you Shinobigami plan to rescue Rukia as well." Naruto Uzumaki and Shisui Uchiha, the women replied in a sarcastic manner. Shisui and Naruto were both shocked by what the woman had just said. In addition to knowing their names, she was also aware of their group's strategy. Naruto unleashed a torrent of questions on the enigmatic woman, which is probably what most Shinigami would have expected the Uzumaki to do in that circumstance. Unaware of how accurate he was, Naruto asked, "How did you know who we are and what we were planning? Who the hell are you? Why are you here? What are you doing carrying Ichigo on your shoulder? And why does he look like he got into a fight with the eyepatch psycho?" When Shisui heard his student's final query, his eyes grew wide. However, the reason is quite different from what one might anticipate. The Uchiha thought to himself, "So that boy she's carrying on her shoulder is Ichigo Kurosaki. No wonder Naruto took an interest in him. With all that Ryotsu that he has, it's amazing that he's just a human," while the women merely smirked at Naruto's interrogation. "Well, it'll take a while to explain it all to you, so I'll start off with an introduction. My name is Yoruichi Shiwan, the person who is now Yoruichi," replied. Place of Shinobigami meeting, the night after. Naruto and the other former shinobi were in the hideout discussing the recent turn of events, which was obviously a very long turn, as well as the advancement of their plans to save Rukia and stop Aizen. The first, and most crucial, was when Naruto and Shisui spoke with Yoruichi, the intruder, who gave them the rundown on Ichigo and the other 13 intruders. After Byakuya and Yukitake reached the holding cell, Yoruichi was forced to render Rukia unconscious and take him to the secret training ground, despite Ichigo's attempts to break him out of the Senzaikyu. The two ex-shinobi were then informed by Yoruichi that she planned to train Ichigo so that he could acquire his own Bankai and save Rukia. Given that the orange-haired Shinigami possessed the Ryotsu required to reach that level, neither shinobi seriously doubted the possibility. The lieutenant's meeting was scheduled to start in an hour, so even though she didn't answer all of Naruto's questions, they didn't have enough time to get the answers. For the time being, the three Shinigami chose to concentrate only on their individual rescue missions. Naruto left the training area and headed straight for the lieutenant's meeting, arriving with 10 minutes to spare. Naruto and the other Shinobigami went to their secret meeting spot after the late-night meeting. Referring to the different jobs that he and the other ex-shinobi were planning to perform as part of their plans to save Rukia, Naruto questioned, "Does everyone know what to do?" The others nodded in agreement. Although they had to modify their plans to fit the circumstances, the changes were made quickly because they weren't very significant. With Rukia's execution rescheduled for the following and the young lieutenant juggling 3 separate rescue attempts, the Shinobigami, the intruders, and both captains Yukitake and Kyoraku were attempting to save Rukia's life. Naruto sighed with relief at this announcement because he truly didn't have time for distractions. Then, let's get some rest. The fight begins tomorrow, Naruto said, and as the former shinobi scattered, he realized that tomorrow would be a very long day. Sokyoku Hill, Soul Society, Seirei. Standing on top of the platform, tethered for her execution, Yamamoto Genryusai gazed at Rukia. He commanded, "Release the Sokyoku." "Yes, sir." The Kido Corps gathered around the Sokyoku and made a hand seal with their clasped hands. On the ground, the ropes that were fastened to the poles started to loosen and finally broke. Lazily, they started to circle the Sokyoku, getting faster every second until the ropes that bound the halberd unwound and sped toward the ground, where they stabbed it. Rukia remembered her brief conversation with Jin at the bridge as she gazed up at the Sokyoku. "Even though Ichimaru was causing me emotional distress at the time, I am gradually finding peace again. However, is this due to the captain? Commander's assurance? Or maybe it's because Sama cut me off without even questioning me when he saw me upset and clinging shamefully to life." Rukia said softly, "Thank you so much, Sama," as 3 cubes emerged from the platform. The 3 cubed positioned themselves in front of Rukia's hands and feet as the rope that was holding her hands together abruptly disappeared. As Rukia began to float toward the scaffold, the halberd burst into flames, encircling it with a pillar of fire that eventually dissipated to reveal a massive phoenix that was at least 2 or 3 times as large as the enormous scaffold. Gazing up at the magnificent phoenix, the commander exclaimed, "Kakoo, the true form of the Sokyoku blade, and the final enforcer of the death penalty. Once he pierces the criminal, the death penalty will be over." Rukia's eyes went wide when she saw the phoenix, while the captains and other onlookers stood in wonder at Kakoo. With a screech and a rearing of its neck, the majestic Sokyoku spread its wings in preparation for a charge. Finally at peace, Rukia bowed her head as it sped toward her. In the interim, "Yukitake, Taiko, aren't you finished yet?" Naruto exclaimed as he strutted around, growing increasingly irritated. This caused Yukitake to frown. After a few seconds, he clapped his hands together and exclaimed, "Patience, Naruto. Fukutaichu. These kinds of things take time." As a cloud of smoke began to emerge from behind the closed doors, "It's finally finished." After making a fist out of his hands, Naruto hurried out the door. He shouted, "I'm going on ahead," as he raced in the direction of Sokyoku Hill. "I'll save Rukia, so get over to Sokyoku Hill with the shield as soon as possible." Yukatake yelled, "N. Naruto. Fukutaichu," and hurried to open the sealed artifact. "Wait for me." Sokyoku Hill, Soul Society, Seirei, huh? Rukia opened her eyes, perplexed that the Sokyoku hadn't yet pierced her. What's going on here? "Are you alright, Rukia?" She recognized the voice, and her eyes grew wide. She gradually raised her head to see a figure with orange hair standing in front of her, using his Zanpakuto to miraculously block the enormous phoenix with just one hand. Ichigo, is that you, Ichigo?" Ichigo turned to face Rukia and smiled. "I've come to save you, Rukia," he said calmly. "Yay, it's me." Rukia bowed her head and her eyes began to well up with tears as her lips began to quiver. "Why? You idiot, I told you not to rescue me." Ichigo appeared perplexed. "Huh?" Ichigo arched an eyebrow as Rukia's head shot up and she gave him a funny scowl. "You idiot, I told you not to come and rescue me. Why did you come to rescue me?" "Oi!" Ichigo screamed. "What do you mean, why did you come to rescue me? You're supposed to thank me, you idiot." Rukia turned her head away and protruded her lower lip. "HMPH, I never asked you to." Ichigo gave her a frown. "Why you little, Ichigo, Rukia?" When Ichigo and Rukia looked down, they saw Naruto waving at them while racing in their direction. Ichigo screamed, "Oi, Naruto!" and waved his free hand in return. "It's about time you came." Naruto released the mode immediately after activating Kurama's shroud and lifting himself up on the scaffold with his chakra arms. Ichigo inquired, "What took you so long?" To which Naruto replied, "I was with Yukatake." Taiko, his expression was one of frustration as he surveyed the area. "Just where is he?" Whoa, as Ichigo stumbled, Naruto's head snapped around, causing the Sokyoku to retreat for a second blow. It was Naruto who said, "Watch out, Ichigo. That thing has been said to power of 1,000,000 Zanpakutos, you won't survive the next attack." With a determined expression on his face, Ichigo grimaced as he glared at the phoenix. "Che? This is nothing, I got this, Naruto." "Sway." Fung gazed at Ichigo, her eyes narrowing. "Who's that guy?" This child was able to hold back the Sokyoku, which is supposed to contain the offensive and defensive skills of 1,000,000 Zanpakutos, with just one hand. What sort of authority is this? When a velvet colored rope wrapped itself around the charging phoenix's neck and stopped its attack, her eyes widened in surprise. The phoenix was held in place when the golden pole at the end of the rope slammed into the earth. "Jusori Yukatake. Sway," Fung said to herself. Suddenly, Shunsui was standing in front of the pole, stabilizing it with his hand. "Yo, Yukatake. You sure like to make people wait, don't ya?" "I'm sorry," Yukatake said, turning to face Shunsui. "The release took me a while, but now we're good to go." Sway. Fung recognized the shield's crest and gritted her teeth in exasperation. "The Shiwan clan seal is that." Both Shunsui and Yukatake pulled out their Zanpakutos and activated the shield by slamming the blade into it. The Sokyoku was bound by a velvet colored rope that glowed, and the flames swiftly moved up the rope in the direction of the phoenix that was trapped. Boom! Large pieces of fire rained down on the people below as the Shiwan shield activated and the Sokyoku exploded. "Not possible, Sway." Fung covered her face with her arms and thought to herself. Ichigo landed on the scaffold after doing a backflip. Rukia gave him a look. Wait, Ichigo, what are you doing?" Ichigo took the piece of cloth that was fastened to Zangetsu and said, "Just shut up and watch." He launched his Zanpakuto into the air and began to spin it around, accelerating until it was only a blur. With a sudden yank at the cloth, he grasped the oversized katana's hilt and held the blade down. A huge surge of Ryatsu engulfed Ichigo, energizing him as his eyes flared as it turned clear blue. When he slammed Zangetsu's point into the scene arrow, it started to glow blue, blinding everyone nearby with the intense blue light. Thud! The scaffold exploded, filling the entire area with a giant of dust that gradually dissipated to reveal the main portion of the scaffold completely destroyed. "You never shut up about how I shouldn't rescue you and how I should just go home. I told you, didn't I? Your opinions are just gonna keep getting ignored," Ichigo said while holding Rukia. Rukia smiled sorrowfully at Ichigo. Yay! Aizane's expression was one of disbelief as she gazed up at the scaffold. Impossible, the Sokyoku stand is. Oh why, Ichigo. Ichigo turned to see Renji, holding his Zanpakuto, dropped the unconscious body of a Keto Corps member onto the ground. Rukia's eyes were wide as she gazed at him. What? Her face gradually lit up with a broad smile. Renji. Thank goodness you're alive, Renji. Alright, Ichigo uttered languidly. He looked at Renji as he slowly raised Rukia into the air. Get ready, Renji. Rukia blinked. She looked up Ichigo and said, Wait, Ichigo, what are you going to do? When Renji realized what Ichigo was going to do, his face went blue. Wait, hey, you aren't planning to. Ichigo shouted, take her, and hurled Rukia like a football at Renji. Rukia yelled, ah, as she soared in Renji's direction. Renji yelled, why? You baka, as she collided with him. Oi, you baka! Naruto slapped Ichigo's head and reprimanded him. What the hell was that for? Ichigo pouted and rubbed the back of his head. Well, I just thought that it was a cool thing to do at the moment. You baka, said Naruto again. He pulled a paper bomb from his uniform and shook his head, saying, you're just lucky she wasn't hurt, or I'd beat the crap out of you, he said, get ready, and threw the paper bomb onto the damaged scaffold. Meanwhile, across Seireiti in different places. When Kushina, Makoto, and Fugaka noticed a mini explosion, they all turned to face Sokyoku Hill. After giving a collective nod, they all snatched a smoke bomb from their uniforms and threw it to the ground. They then bounded over to the hill where Naruto was. The Shinigamis dispersed across Seireiti gazed at the 4 enormous smoke pillars that emerged from 4 different places, each unsure of what they were. A random Shinigami yelled to his fellows, let's go and check it out, and hurried over to a random pillar of smoke. Ichigo said, they're gone, as he observed Renji sprinting around the area while holding Rukia. Yay, Naruto stated as he glanced down at Hiruzen and Haku among the throng of onlookers gathered on the hill. Flash. Stepping to their side, Naruto appeared to vanish out of thin air. Hey, Gigi, Haku. Naruto. Fukutaichu, Haku cried. There's no time. Naruto shook his head dismissively. I need you and Gigi to go after Renji and Rukia and make sure that they're okay. Hiruzen gave a nod. He answered, got it, and then abruptly moved away, with Haku trailing closely behind. Sway. Fung glared at her vice. Captain flashed as she stepped back, her eyes narrowing. Haku, you scum, I'll make sure to destroy you with my own too. Thud. What? Cried Sway. Fung as she sped off the cliff and past the other Shinigamis. Who are you, you scum? The unidentified masked person who had tackled Sway. Fung clung to her while remaining silent. Sway. Fung took hold of the attacker's arm and squinted her eyes. She shouted, I asked you, who you were, and flung her over her shoulders. Sway. Fung was startled when the figure abruptly vanished and then reappeared behind her, kicking her in the back and sending her hurtling into a tree. Sway. Fung caught a tree branch while balancing herself in midair, flipped over, and safely landed on the branch. She gazed at the figure with narrowed eyes. Only one individual in Soul Society has the ability to move that quickly. Glaring at the figure, Sway. Fung exclaimed, Shiwan, Yoruichi. Hey, it looks like you recognized me, Sway. Fung. Sway. Fung grinned and said, I see, to her. Just because you've been gone a long time doesn't necessarily mean that you've raised your skills. Yoruichi grinned at her after taking off her mask. It looks like your skills have dulled quite a bit, on the other hand. Don't be so full of yourself, Sway. Fung said, her voice containing a hint of danger. When will you stop thinking that you're so better than us? Both the Secret Mobile Corps and the Correction Corps are under my control now. When Yoruichi's Zanpakuto was drawn by Sway. Fung, her eyes widened. According to Sway. Fung, your days are numbered, as she struck the tree with the point of her katana. Shiwan Yoruichi. Yoruichi blinked as she was abruptly surrounded by 20 Secret Mobile Corps members. Now, let's see, returning to Sokyoku Hill. Shunsui smiled and tipped his hat. Well, he said, snatching Yukitake by the captain's uniform hem. I guess that it's time to disappear, huh? Yukitake's gaze widened. Wait, what? Shunsui yelled, let's go, and hurried to the cliff's edge, pulling his fellow captain with him. Yamamoto Genryusai's face was unreadable as he watched them leap off the cliff. Izan yelled, Abarai. Fukutaichu, please stop, as she and Sasaki Chojiro chased after him. But Renji ignored her and continued on his way. Whoa! Izan and Chojiro halted when they sensed something ahead of them, and Renji smiled as he turned to face them. With his cloak flapping behind him, Ichigo abruptly materialized in front of them. Naruto then appeared beside him, holding his Zanpakuto. Ichigo said, "I'm afraid that I can't let you two pass," while giving them a fierce look. "Run, Itagumo," Izan exclaimed, pulling her Zanpakuto out of its sheath. Her katana started to glow, and as two thinner and smaller blades emerged at a 45-degree angle from either side of the hilt, the blade gradually became much thinner. Chojiro said, "Pierce, Ganryomaru," while holding his Zanpakuto up to his face. The blade glowed and gradually grew thinner until it resembled a rapier. "What?" Izan saw Ichigo swiftly eliminate Chojiro with a straightforward uppercut to the jaw after slamming the tip of his Zanpakuto into the ground. Impossible, he didn't even use his Zanpakuto to defeat Sasaki. Fukutaichu. Before Izan could react, Ichigo turned to face her and flitted to her side, kneeing her in the stomach. Izan collapsed to the ground, gazing up at Ichigo before she lost consciousness. "He's much too powerful for us. Who is he?" Ichigo sensed that something was coming at him quickly, so he grabbed his Zanpakuto and turned to face Kuchiki Byakuya's charge. Their Zanpakutos clashed as Ichigo glared at him, his eyes narrowed. Ichigo calmly said, "I can see you, Kuchiki Byakuya." Byakuya's face remained motionless as he blinked. "Kurosaki Ichigo, do not be so arrogant. Just because you were barely able to match my speed does not mean that you are a match for me." Naruto nodded after taking a quick look at the two unconscious vice captains. "Well, I'm off then, Ichigo." Ichigo appeared taken aback. "What? You're going, Naruto?" Naruto gave him a smile. "I trust you, Ichigo. You can defeat Byakuya." When Naruto said this, Ichigo's eyes widened in surprise. Naruto turned around and walked away, declaring, "I'm going to stop this madness once and for all. You take care of things here, Ichigo." Ichigo bowed his head and grinned. He raised his head to meet the 6th Division captain's eyes and said, "You got it. I will undoubtedly defeat him." After standing motionless for a moment, Naruto sighed and said, "Let's finish this," before vanishing. "I'm sure you were right about me having the fastest flash step in all of Soul Society, Tosen. If what I'm worried about is correct, I'm going to need it." Naruto flew past a column of buildings, spun around on his feet, flash, stepped past a huge wall, and raced as fast as he could in the direction of the Central 46 compound. In the interim, "Let's go." As Zabuza and Yachiru led the group to Sokyoku Hill, they ran past a group of Shinigamis, followed by Chad, Ishida, Orihime, Ganju, and Zabuza. "Wait. Stop." Zabuza skidded to a stop and was told to do so. "What's that, Zabuza-san?" Orihime inquired, glancing back at the small, pink-haired vice captain who was looking up at him. Zabuza said, "I want you guys to stay here." Yachiru. "Fukutaichu, please stay here with the others," he said. "I'll climb Sokyoku Hill by myself and eliminate any dangers there." Yachiru grinned broadly at the 4th seat, saying, "Of course, Momo-chan." Orihime and the others laughed at this. "Momo-chan," Ishida laughed, and as Zabuza glared at him, he instantly fell silent and straightened up. Just kidding, Zabuza-san." He gave Yachiru a nod and said, "I'm off." Orihime and everyone else's eyes, except for Yachiru, widened in shock when Zabuza abruptly vanished with a flash step. So fast, Orihime stammered. "Soul Society, Seirei, Central 46 compound." Flashing to the front of the Central 46 compound, Minato and Shisui looked around to see if anyone was there. "Well, the outside's empty," Shisui said, turning to face Minato. "What now, Minato?" "Fukutaichu." Minato hurried to the door, saying, "There's no time to waste. I have a bad feeling about something. When you can, catch up." Then he vanished from view. With tears streaming from her eyes as she gazed up at her captain, Hinamori flung herself into his arms. Aizen. Taiko," she said, her lips quivering as she looked down, and she began to sob uncontrollably. As Hinamori sobbed into his arms, Aizen smiled at her sincere expression. There, Hinamori. Everything will work out." Hinamori sobbed, Aizen. Taiko, I'm so glad that why. You're okay." She was too preoccupied to notice her captain removing his Zanpakuto from its sheath. Aizen whispered, "Farewell, Hinamori," as his blade sped toward Hinamori's heart. "What?" When Minato abruptly materialized in front of Aizen, blocking his sword with his own, his eyes widened. With his typical phony smile, Aizen said, "Minato. Fukutaichu, what are you doing here?" When Minato said, "I could ask you the same thing, Aizen." Taiko, his eyes narrowed, You attempted to kill your fourth seat? Aizen spread his arms wide and said, "It's my way of helping her out. I was trying to save her from the agony of having to live without me." Minato. Fukutaichu, what else would you like me to do? Hinamori said, W. Wait, gazing up at Aizen with wide eyes. W. What's G? Going on H. Here, Aizen. Taiko. With a gentle glance down at her, Minato said, Nothing, Hinamori. It's nothing that you need to worry about just yet. N. Namikaze. Fukutaichu? Hinamori asked, glancing at him. Hinamori's eyes began to droop, and she fell to her knees, her eyes fluttering shut as Minato whispered, Sleep, tapping her head gently with his fingers. Aizen. Taiko. Very impressive, Minato. Fukutaichu, Aizen replied, even without an incantation. After carefully laying the unconscious Hinamori on the ground, Minato turned to face Aizen and said, Minato. Shisui, Hitsugaya Toshiro, and his vice. Captain Matsumoto Rangaku burst through the door as Minato and Aizen turned to look around. Hitsugaya. Taiko, Minato cried out. Hitsugaya glanced at Aizen and then at the Hinamori who was sleeping on the floor before saying, Namikaze. Fukutaichu. Momo, just what the hell's going on here? Rest assured, Hitsugaya. Taiko. As he continued to stare at Aizen, Minato explained, I just put her to sleep for a while. I was barely able to stop Aizen from trying to stab her in the heart. With icy blue eyes, Hitsugaya glared at him and said, Aizen, I'll kill you for tea. No, Hitsugaya. Taiko, Minato said, extending his arm before the 10th Division captain. Please take Hinamori and leave. Like the devil, we will. I don't exactly know what's going on here, but, Hitsugaya glared at Minato. Please, Hitsugaya. Taiko, let's leave this to them. Rangaku put a gentle hand on Hitsugaya's shoulders and said, we should get Hinamori out of here. Hitsugaya's eyes widened for a moment before becoming soft. With his eyes closed, Hitsugaya said, Namikaze. Fukutaichu, I'm counting on you. I understand, Minato said, nodding. Now, please, let Shisui and I handle this. He looked down at the floor, and his eyes hardened abruptly. We'll take care of Aizen. Taiko once and for all. After Flash. Stepping away with Rangaku, Hitsugaya nodded and took Hinamori in his arms. Minato and Shisui turned to Aizen and asked, Minato. Fukutaichu, why are you willing to confront your own captain so easily? Do you not feel guilty or regretful about what you were going to do? I've never trusted you. Even when I first met you, I knew that something was wrong with you, Minato said, fixing his unblinking gaze on his captain. Don't try to play games with me. I knew you were aware of my suspicions about you the entire time. I had always hoped that I was mistaken, but it appears that my suspicions were right, and I was always prepared to fight you if the time ever came. I see, Aizen grinned at this. Aizen Sosuke, you will lose to us. You got that right, said Shisui as he slowly pulled his Zanpakuto from its sheath. You got that right, said Minato, who had a determined expression on his face and turned to Shisui, who nodded. Calling out their respective Shikai commands, Minato and Shisui both aimed their Zanpakutos at Aizen. Hiraishin. Flash. Karasu no Hansha, protect from the shadows. Soul Society, Seirei, Central 46 Compound. Hiraishin. Flash. Karusa no Hansha, protect from the shadows. A yellow. White current of electricity flowed through both of the kunai's white metallic blades, and the handles were made of some sort of sleek black wood with the kanji for thunder written vertically on them. As Shisui's and Minato's Zanpakuto's katanas started to glow, Minato's katana started to drastically shrink in size, with the middle of the katana splitting in two. After the Zanpakuto had completed his transformation, Minato was seen holding two kunai that resembled the Hiraishin kunais he had used in the ninja world, but the blades on these were much more edged and defined, giving them an almost strange trident-like appearance. Shisui's Zanpakuto, on the other hand, remained the same size. The hilt turned a midnight blue color, and at the end of the pommel were two crow's feathers that were somehow attached to it. The blade itself, however, gained a clear transparent polish that gave it the appearance of a mirror, and the tsuba also remained the same shape, though it appeared to contain what appeared to be a crow's eye in the center, though Aizen couldn't tell because it closed immediately upon materialization. With a faint chuckle, Aizen said, I must say that I'm surprised to see your Zanpakuto's true form. Shisui-san, as his eyes widened slightly upon realizing that he was Shisui's Zanpakuto in Shikai form. I thought that you hadn't shown it to anyone, and yet here it is. Slowly raising his right kunai and pointing it at Aizen, Minato, who had been silently staring at the floor, said, Aizen Sosuke, I'm afraid that we have to take you out right here and now. Spreading his arms wide as though embracing Minato's threat, Aizen grinned and said, "Minato. Fukutaichu, I'm afraid it might not be as easy as you two might think it is, but feel free to try nonetheless. Let's get this over with," Shisui yelled as he lunged towards him, Minato trailing closely behind. "Hold on, Shisui. Don't you hear anything outside?" Minato said, grabbing Shisui's shoulder and gesturing to the door as he skidded to a stop. As he focused on the building's exterior, Shisui narrowed his eyes and said, "It sounds like there's some fighting going on outside, but wah." "Oh, so you're here." Aizen looked sideways at the figure as she landed by his side, and Minato and Shisui ducked as a figure flew through the door, his sword just missing the tips of their heads by a millimeter. Minato straightened up and looked at the figure, his eyes narrowing at the sight of him. "Ichimaru Jin," Minato said slowly. "So another traitor appears," Shisui said, calmly gazing at Jin. "It appears that we were correct about you after all. You were with Aizen the entire time, weren't you?" "I have no idea what you're talking about, Shisui-san," Jin said, his seemingly eternal smile fixed on his face, tilting his head to the side as he fixed Minato and Shisui with his snake-like gaze. "I was just strolling through Seirei when I heard some shouting coming from this direction, so I thought that I'd come by and see what's up." "Ichimaru Jin," Minato snarled, "I think I might add that you were always the one who was suspicious. I'm not shocked in the least." "What happened, Jin?" With his gaze still fixed on Shisui and Minato, Aizen inquired. "He's gotten even stronger, Aizen. Taiko," Jin said in his typical derisive tone, his smile widening even more. "It seems like we need to watch ourselves around him, am I right?" With his Shikai activated and cloaked in Kurama's shroud, Naruto sped into the building, causing the area near the door to explode. "And speak of the devil," Jin said, gazing at Naruto. Before returning his attention to Aizen, Minato took a quick look at his son. "As late as usual, huh, Naruto?" "It wasn't my fault, you know," Naruto said nonchalantly as he looked at his father. "Yukitake. Taiko took too long releasing the Shiwan shield," he said. "Anyway, don't worry. No one has been harmed or killed." The traitorous captain was looking at him calmly when he turned to face Aizen. "Now, Aizen," Naruto glared at him, clenching his free hand into a fist. "What exactly are you after?" To the surprise of everyone in the room except Jin, Aizen smiled at Naruto and whispered something as he sheathed his Zanpakuto. "What do I want, Uzumaki-kun?" "That's a really good question. What exactly do I want? Cash? Strength? Perhaps the entire Soul Society?" "Answer me and stop playing games," Naruto demanded. With a gentle giggle, Aizen said, "Very well, what I want is Kuchiki Rukia." Naruto's shocked eyes grew wide. Rukia, what in the world are you talking about, exactly? You would have pursued her just before her execution if you truly wanted her." Aizen shook his head and closed his eyes, saying, "Uzumaki-kun, you're not getting what I'm saying. For a long time, you and your shinobi have been a constant hindrance to my plans. I intend to obtain a specific item that was placed inside your friend Kuchiki Rukia's soul after I get rid of you and your obnoxious companions." Naruto snarled at this, "So I'm going to take back what is rightfully mine before using my own hands to get rid of the pawn." With his face unreadable, Naruto gazed at the ground and said, "What, did you call her?" He blinked. "Aizen, tell me. Rukia, what did you just call her?" This made Aizen smile. "I referred to her as a pawn. Is something wrong?" "Never call her that again, I'll kill you," Naruto said, his eyes wide and brimming with rage as he looked up at Aizen, his teeth bared. "Well, I wonder how you'll manage to do that, Uzumaki-kun." Aizen's smile widened even more as he gazed at Naruto, seemingly enjoying torturing him. "I'll do it, Naruto closed his eyes as he started to feel his anger rising inside of him. Naruto. A mind replica of Naruto, Konoha. Kamikaze's voice caused Naruto's eyes to pop open, and when he looked around, he saw that he was once again inside his mind, which was essentially a perfect duplicate of Konoha, with himself perched atop the Hokage's monument. Naruto closed his eyes and tilted his face towards the sky, breathing in the icy cold air as he felt the gentle beating of the rain against his face. The sky was dark. Gray. Thunder rolled from their home above the sky, and Konoha was encircled by a huge, immobile hurricane-like storm that had blocked out both the earth and the sky. With his hand on Naruto's shoulder, Kamikaze materialized beside him and asked, "Are you at ease now, Naruto?" Kamikaze questioned, his tone unexpectedly solemn for once. "Don't you realize that Aizen is merely attempting to agitate you?" As he said this, Kamikaze's hold on his shoulder became more firm. Glaring at his Zanpakuto's spirit, Naruto opened his eyes and said, "Kamikaze, I know that. You don't have to. If you really want to protect your friends and comrades, then all you need to do is keep your rage under control," Naruto said, abruptly stopping his speech as he felt something poke his neck. He rolled his eyes down to find Kamikaze's blade gently pressing against his neck. "Naruto, you're not alone and you're stronger than him." Kamikaze's words caused Naruto's eyes to widen. "You have Kurama, me, your fellow Shinobigami, and even the Ryokas who came to save Rukia. You can succeed as long as you resist Aizen's attempts to control you." "Don't mind me. Just trying to take a nap over here," snorted Kurama, who was attempting to lie down on the ground behind them. After a few moments of silence, Naruto said, "Kamikaze, you." He looked up and grinned broadly at his Zanpakuto spirit. "Even though you constantly taunt me, you've always been there to help Kurama and me, haven't you? Even someone as silly and insane as you has their moments, I suppose. Everyone has to be serious at times, even someone like me." Kamikaze sniffed at this. With a smile on his face, Naruto said, "I suppose I should have anticipated this from my Zanpakuto." Returning to the actual world. With an enormous smile on his face, Naruto opened his eyes and gazed at the now surprised Aizen. "I wonder what happened to him," Aizen thought to himself as he gazed at the transformed boy. "I wonder if he and his Zanpakuto were able to have a conversation." Minato grinned as he looked sideways at his son. Naruto glanced around and saw something strange. "Hold on a minute. That conversation lasted nearly 20 minutes, but it seems like just a few seconds have gone by." Aizen remarked, "Well, I'm waiting, Uzumaki-kun. I'll make sure that you don't get into my head again, and I'll definitely make sure that you never get your hands on the item that's inside of Rukia," Naruto said gravely as he raised his sword and assumed a fighting stance. Aizen's eyes narrowed as he said, "You shouldn't get so full of yourself," and the smile vanished from his face. "Don't worry, Uzumaki-kun. I'll show you the mistake in what you just said shortly." With his eyes closed, Shisui, who had backed up gradually until he was nearly directly behind Minato, raised his Zanpakuto to his face and whispered, "Karasu no Tsudiya," before opening his eyes to reveal his Sharingan. Sokyoku Hill, Soul Society, Seirei, Fukutaichu Abarai. Haku and Hiruzen were running toward them when Renji stopped and turned around. "Haku. Fukutaichu. Hello, Hiruzen. Fukutaichu. Good to see you're still not tired out," Hiruzen said, watching Renji. "Are you in any pain?" "Not really," Renji smiled. "I'm fine except for the soreness I still have from my fight with Kuchiki, Taiko." Hiruzen nodded and said, "That's great, go ahead and take the lead, Haku. If someone tries to stop us along the way, I'll remain in the back." With a nod, Haku leapt forward and said, "Let's go," racing across the plain with Renji and the others in close pursuit. Renji looked back at Hiruzen after running for about 20 minutes. "So, Hiruzen. Fukutaichu," he began, "what's all this about?" "Aizen Sosuke has betrayed Soul Society," Hiruzen said bluntly after closing his eyes for a moment. The eyes of Renji and Rukia widened in surprise. "What, Aizen? Taiko, a traitor?" cried Renji. "Not possible." "I'm afraid it's true," said Haku, shaking his head. "He seemed to be pursuing a particular object, and it seems that it was connected to your execution, Rukia." Pointing to herself, Rukia said, Me? Yes, Haku replied. "He was aiming for you to be killed so that he could somehow use that to get the item that he wanted." Renji gritted his teeth and said, "That dreadful piece of... that jerk. That betrayer. Because of what he and his subordinates have done, I will kill them." Hiruzen grabbed his shoulder and said, "Abarai. Fukutaichu, don't be so hurried. Despite being a traitor, Aizen Sosuke is still a captain. Additionally, keep in mind that his subordinates are also captains, and you have already been defeated by his Kyoka Suigetsu." "His Kyoka Suigetsu?" Renji blinked. "When you say that I've already fallen victim to it, what do you mean? I believed his Zanpakuto to be." "He's been lying to everyone the entire time," said Hiruzen, shaking his head. "Kyoka Suigetsu, his Zanpakuto, possesses the ability to induce what is known as complete hypnosis." "Whole hypnosis." "That's right," Hiruzen replied. "Although I'm not exactly 100% sure on this, anyone who should happen to look upon the Zanpakuto in its Shikai state falls victim to its complete hypnosis, and there's absolutely no way to free themselves from it. However, I should still make an effort to, and remember that you gave Ichigo your word that you'd protect Rukia with your life," Hiruzen said to him. As he ran, Renji glanced at the ground and said, I guess so." "Don't worry, Renji. Fukutaichu," Hiruzen said, grinning somewhat reassuringly, "Naruto. He has spent a considerable amount of time getting ready for a confrontation with Aizen. Everything will be fine. While Renji ran with Rukia in his arms, Rukia stared blankly at the trees they passed. Naruto, Ichigo, just how far are you two willing to go to save a friend? It seemed like fate that you two would cross paths, but it also seemed like you two are too alike for your own good. What? Hold on. Renji abruptly turned to face Hiruzen again. You mean there are multiple subordinates? Yes, said Haku, nodding. One is Ichimaru Jin, and the other is. Cease. What's going on, Haku? Fukutaichu? Renji asked, looking at him bewildered as Haku skidded to a stop. It's him, Haku muttered as he looked straight ahead at a figure that was coming toward them. Who? Asked Renji as he stared at the figure. He could barely make out the long purple hair tied into braids and the clear orange goggles. Wait a second, is that Tosen Kanami? Tosen stopped 10 feet in front of the 4 Shinigamis and said, I must admit that I'm impressed. You Shinobigamis are quite impressive, he said. I guess there are advantages to being a ninja after all. I would like to ask you one question. How did just you guys predict our every move while everyone else couldn't? Glaring at Tosen, Hiruzen narrowed his eyes and said, We're here to take you in, Tosen Kanami. Tosen focused on their Ryotsu and gauged the separation between the 2 Shinigami and the formed shinobi before flash. Stepping between Haku and Hiruzen and lifting his hand a little. How foolish. Senton Hakuja. That is, until a long, white piece of cloth came out of Tosen's sleeve and wrapped itself around both him and the 2 he was pursuing. What? They managed to skew my sense of time and distance in some way, because Tosen's head snapped to the right as he realized that he was going to use the Kido on Haku and Hiruzen in addition to Renji and Rukia. You won't get away from us so easily, Haku said resolutely as the pieces of cloth started to wrap even more tightly around them. Haku and Hiruzen took advantage of Tosen's startled reaction to quickly seize his arms and restrain him. The area was filled with a brilliant burst of white light, which then vanished, revealing the 5 Shinigamis. Soul Society, Seirei, Central 46 Compound. Naruto's Zanpakuto created a torrent of water that Aizen and Jin could hardly avoid. My, how dangerous, Jin exclaimed as he rolled onto his hands and pushed himself off the ground to avoid a stream of lightning that was about to hit him. Uzumaki-kun, you've grown, Aizen said, swinging his katana at Naruto's head as he drew his Zanpakuto and faced Naruto's charge head. On, their Zanpakutos clashing. With his own thrusting forward to try to pierce Aizen's heart, Naruto ducked as Aizen's Zanpakuto whizzed over his head. Aizen sidestepped it with ease, using the flat of his blade to slap Naruto's Zanpakuto away, but is it enough? Before Aizen could react, Naruto landed one knee on the ground, focused, and pressed his fist lightly against the floor's smooth surface before leaping into the air and doing a makeshift cartwheel. Not quite. He slammed his fist into Aizen's face and grunted. Despite wearing Kurama's shroud, Aizen shook off the blow with ease, flickering to Naruto's side and slashing at it. Naruto flashed a few feet away from him and looked at Shisui, who was just standing there, staring at Aizen with an odd expression on his face. I wonder what he's up to. Minato flashed to Aizen's side and stabbed him with his kunai, but Aizen saw right away and slashed out with his own blade, and Minato narrowed his eyes and smiled, causing Aizen's eyes to widen in surprise as Minato flashed behind him. Aizen blinked as he noticed a big cut on his left lower torso. Impressive. I used my Kyoka Suigetsu a long time ago. He should have been trapped in my complete hypnosis, but he narrowed his eyes as he looked back at Minato. How is this possible? I am certain that Uzumaki Naruto can counter my Kyoka Suigetsu with the help of his Kyuubi, and I am also well aware that the other Shinobigami are aware of my Zanpakuto's complete hypnosis and that Uchiha Shisui, Fugaku, and Mikoto can use their Sharingans to cancel out my Kyoka Suigetsu's abilities. So what could be? He looked over at Naruto and the others, trying to make sense of what had just transpired. Aizen's gaze wandered to Shisui's location. Minato's swift attack was dodged by Aizen, and as it passed overhead, his kunai sliced the tip of Aizen's hair. As he twirled his kunai on the tips of his fingers, Minato remarked, Aizen, you shouldn't assume that you've seen our full powers. None of us had ever needed to go all out against an opponent, that's all. Aizen's eyes widened in shock and Minato hurled both of his kunai at him, one after the other. Aizen was able to avoid these with ease, but Minato caught him off guard by quickly emerging behind him, grabbing the kunais and flickering to Aizen's side. But that doesn't mean that Aizen isn't dangerous, Minato thought to himself as he prepared for another blow. Aizen may be cruel and a traitor, but he's still one of the most skilled opponents that I've ever faced. Aizen squatted down and slammed his blade against Minato's kunai, surprising him by pushing him back a couple of inches. He was joined by Naruto and Minato. But then, Shisui began, "It looks like we'll need to go all out in order to defeat you, Aizen Sosuke." As Jin approached Aizen's side, Minato said, "Do not think yourself worthy of facing us, Aizen Sosuke. Consider it an honor that we consider you dangerous enough to crush with all of our might." Aizen squinted as he gazed at his vice. "Captain. How arrogant," he said with a startled laugh. "You three haven't even seen what your opponent is capable of, and yet you already believe that you can beat him?" Aizen blinked, unwilling to show the enemies how surprised he was, but Minato smiled as he, Naruto, and Shisui all rolled up their right sleeves to reveal a seal on each of their right forearms that was almost the same as the ones placed on the captain and vice. Captains who entered the human world. It can't be. What are those? Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. Having foreseen this event happening beforehand, Tosen had Kosen place these seals on myself and the rest of the Shinobigamis before entering the Shino Academy in order to hide our true strengths. At this, Jin scowled a little. "What are you trying to say, Naruto-san?" Naruto said, "What I'm saying is that the total amount of our powers that were sealed off is around half," and Aizen's eyes widened in surprise. "It's impossible. Their Ryotsu, except for Uzumaki Naruto's, which is clearly above captain level, could already be regarded as being on a captain level. And yet they're claiming to only be using half of their full power. What can ya do, Aizen?" "Taiko." Jin chuckled quietly to himself as he realized what this meant. Before the two traitors vanished in a blinding flash of white light, Aizen noticed a long piece of white cloth emerge from Shisui's sleeve as well. "We better be getting out of here before this gets even more unpleasant," he said as the white cloth quickly wrapped itself around his sleeve. Sokyoku Hill, Soul Society, Seirei, around 10 feet apart, Zabuza, Kushina, Fugaku, and Makoto witnessed 3 bursts of white light. When the light faded, Aizen, Jin, Tosen, Haku, Hiruzen, Renji, Rukia, Naruto, Minato, and Shisui were standing there. "It's finally going to happen," Kushina thought, narrowing his eyes as he saw Aizen. Her gaze strayed to Naruto and the others, and she widened them when she noticed that their right sleeves were rolled up. To protect themselves from an attack by Aizen's group, Naruto, Minato, and Shisui Flash moved between Aizen and Renji's group. "Oi, Naruto!" Renji shouted. Naruto quickly returned his attention to Aizen and the others after taking a quick look at Renji. "Yeah, what's up?" "Oi! Look at me when I'm talking to you," Renji said with a humorous frown before giving Naruto a backhand to the head. With a frown, Naruto wildly waved his Zanpakuto at him, saying, "Hey, do you not realize that I'm in a somewhat dire situation right now? Where is Ichigo? He was with you the last time I checked, but he's not with you now," Renji said, his expression solemn once more. "Is he okay?" Naruto looked at the direction Ichigo and Byakuya were going in and remarked, "I left him with that Byakuya a while back. I'm sure that he's fine, Renji. He would be too strong for Ichigo to defeat." Renji sighed and closed his eyes, saying, "Let's hope." Naruto resumed his position, turning back to face Aizen and the others, saying, "Anyway, you and Rukia leave, okay?" Renji's eyes narrowed. "Are you serious? Don't think I'm just going to?" Tattoo. Brows, yay. As Naruto glared at Renji, his eyes widened in shock. "If Rukia ends up in Aizen's hands, I will never forgive you. Right now, take her and run. Remember, you made a commitment to Ichigo." Head bowed, Renji said, "You better win, Naruto." With his gaze still on Aizen, Naruto nodded and said, "Yeah, I know, now get going already." Before leaping up and racing across the landscape, Renji gave Naruto and the others one last look. "Naruto, you had better survive this. Should I go and chase them down, Aizen?" "Sama?" Tosen stirred, sensing that Renji and Rukia's Ryotsu was getting farther away. Aizen grinned and said, "No, Konami. It's all right. Taking care of these former shinobi is our top priority right now, but we can find those two at our own pace later." "Well, good luck on that, Aizen," he said mockingly, grinning as he heard this. Naruto and the other Shinobigami put their left hands on their respective seals, and as their power limiters glowed, they gazed up at Aizen and his 2 subordinates, their eyes glowing as an overwhelming amount of Ryotsu began to flow from within them. Kai. Sokyoku Hill, Soul Society, Seirei. Just a few feet away, Byakuya staggered forward, trying not to faint as Ichigo slammed the point of his sword into the ground and clenched his teeth. He looked at his bloodied hand and clenched it into a tight fist, saying, "So, you wanted to know why I was okay with killing Rukia? Those who have sinned must be judged," Byakuya went on, "and once the sentence is decided it's final because it is the law." Ichigo turned around and faced him as he heard this. So you would even murder your own sister because it's the law? Ichigo inquired. Affection for relatives, how ridiculous. What? Ichigo's eyes widened. Any emotion has no meaning when it's against the wall. To begin with, I never experienced any of those feelings. As one of the great four noble houses, the Kuchiki clan must serve as a model for all Shinigami. Who will follow the law if we don't? Ichigo spat blood into his mouth and said, I'm sorry, but I don't get it. I would still have broken the law if I were you. Byakuya appeared startled. I see. So, Soul Society, not me, had been his adversary all along. Kurosaki Ichigo, Byakuya exclaimed, you're free. Spiritedness has broken my sword. This duel is why. Ichigo's eyes widened in shock as he saw Naruto, Minato, Shisui, Zabuza, Haku, Hiruzen, Kushina, Renji, Rukia, Aizen, Jin, and Tosen appear around 100 feet from where he and Byakuya were. Byakuya stopped when he sensed a large group of Shinigami approaching. Naruto. And Rukia and Renji too. What on earth is he doing? I told that jerk to keep Rukia safe, and he simply... They appear to have arrived, Byakuya remarked quietly. Ichigo glanced briefly at him before returning his attention to Naruto and the others. Oi, Byakuya. Are Naruto and those other guys going up against Aizen and his subordinates? Ichigo asked. Despite the circumstances, Ichigo couldn't help but be irritated by Byakuya's response. You were correct, and he gave him a humorous glare. Just moments before their battle was over, Yamamoto Genryusai had already been told by Hitsugaya, Taiko of Aizen's betrayal and had asked Kiraku, Taiko to use Tentaikura to tell everyone in Seirei. Byakuya watched Ichigo struggle to stand up and looked at him. Where do you think you're going, Kurosaki Ichigo? He stood up, and Ichigo glanced up at him. With a scowl at Byakuya, he replied, I'm going to help Naruto kick that traitor's ass, of course. Ichigo was taken aback when Byakuya said, there is no need for that, remember why you came here in the first place, Kurosaki Ichigo. When Byakuya said this, Ichigo cast a downward glance. Well yay, but... Byakuya declared, Uzumaki Naruto is more than capable of handling Aizen, in spite of himself. Byakuya was prepared to give Naruto credit when it was due, even though they were at odds. He is one of the strongest members of the Gode 13, and he and the other former shinobis are more than capable of defeating the traitor. If you doubt my words, then stay and see what I mean. In the interim, Tosen felt a huge surge of Ryotsu from the Shinobigami, and his eyes widened in surprise. What is this? The Ryotsu of the former shinobi has doubled. How on earth is this possible? At this pace? Aizen caught Tosen's attention. Aizen, Sama, what? Tosen's head turned abruptly when he sensed Kushina reaching out to touch them. Around Kushina, 10 pink energy bolts appeared and raced in the direction of the three traitors. By using Flash Step, Aizen and his two subordinates were able to swiftly avoid the attack and narrowly avoided the ensuing devastating explosion. When Aizen saw this, he smiled and squinted. Kido had always been Uzumaki Kushina's forte, and he used Hado 91. Senju Koden without yelling its name or reciting the incantation at full power. However, this is a trivial task for the most skilled Kido master to have ever been produced in all of Soul Society. Jin glanced at Aizen and down at his burned left arm. It seems that 5th Division's Sanseki Sans attacks gotten even stronger. If they got any more surprises up their sleeves, I'm afraid that we're gonna have Ta retreat. Aizen, Taiko. Aizen looked down at his superior. It seems like it. Aizen gave a startled smile and blinked. Well, if it isn't 11 ND Division's Momochi, Yanseki, 2nd Division's Haku, Fukutaichu, and 8th Division's Sarutobi. Fukutaichu. How good of you to come and finally join us. Zabuza drew his Zanpakuto slowly while he gazed at Jin. You're not getting away this time, Ichimaru Jin. You're going to pay for pulling that prank on me last year. My, Jin said with a smile. You're being even more scary than your captain. You're strong enough to defeat your captain, but unlike him, you ain't afraid to use your full powers if necessary. Hey, flattery won't get you anywhere, Ichimaru. Slaughter, Shikohito, said Zabuza. Zabuza's Zanpakuto started to glow and swell until it looked a lot like an enormous butcher knife, with the exception that it had a big hole in the front of the blade. The front of Shikohito was stained with blood, and it was pale gray. A condensed sphere of mist that appeared neither solid nor liquid appeared to encircle the large hole in the front. With the point pointing in Jin's direction, Zabuza held the blade in front of him. Get ready, Ichimaru. Oh, how scary, Jin pretended as he raised his hands in a sign of defeat. Your blade is fitting considering the fact that you've lived your whole entire life nicknamed as the Demon of the Hidden Mist. Anyone who's laid eyes on it have been terrified cause of its unique powers. I better be careful. With a low chuckle to himself, Zabuza bent his head. The only non-shinobi Shinigami that's been able to survive my Shikohito in a fight was my captain, Zaraki Kenpachi, and that's only because I spared him out of my respect for him. It made Jin laugh. Oh, one question, Zabuza commented. Jin turned to Zabuza. The sphere began to slowly leak out a thin wave of mist as Zabuza turned his sword over and showed Jin the flat of his blade. Would you rather I leave enough of you to bury, or would you rather be cremated? Makoto cried out, Hado 73, Soren Sokatsui, instead. In order to avoid the Ankins that Makoto hurled at him immediately after, Tosen swiftly dodged 2 bursts of Ryotsu before they could strike him. He then swiftly weaved to the left and right. She has a deadly poison on her Ankins. I'll die in a matter of minutes if I'm not careful, but avoiding them all will be difficult. Raising his Zanpakuto, Tosen deftly sidestepped one of the Ankins' blows while dodging another. He felt Kushina's presence behind him, and his head snapped to the side as he retreated from the Ankins. Whoa! As he swiftly drove his katana into the sword, Tosen muttered to himself. He quickly swung his leg in retaliation, but Kushina deflected the kick with ease and pummeled Tosen with a flurry of punches and kicks. Feeling Kushina's fist go dangerously near his head, the former captain grimaced. According to what I recall, Uzumaki Kushina mostly relied on her Kido and Hikuda skills during combat rather than using her Zanpakuto very often. He kicked at Kushina's stomach and quickly slapped aside a punch. "Ah!" exclaimed Kushina as she staggered back a few feet. "Hey, just kidding." When Kushina emerged behind Tosen, his eyes widened in surprise. Her Zanpakuto swung over his head, and he ducked quickly. However, it's not as infrequent as Uchiha Shisui. Sheathing her Zanpakuto, Kushina grinned. When Tosen realized that Kushina had been diverting his attention so he wouldn't notice Fugaku slowly approaching him, his head snapped to the right. Realizing that Fugaku had quickly slashed him in several places, Tosen grimaced and clutched his right arm. My right arm is useless, damn it. When Tosen's hand instinctively dropped his Zanpakuto, he swiftly sheathed it in his left hand. I see. I can't use my Zanpakuto anymore. Tosen dodged a horizontal slash from Fugaku by bending his body backwards. Tosen kicked Fugaku in the chest, sending him skidding back a few feet. Tell me, Fugaku, he said. Why is it that you are fighting me when you have no fear emanating from your blade? Che, was Fugaku's swift response, as he sped up to his captain and slashed his sword up at him, trying to cut his face from chin to chin. I've never cared for your ideals, Tosen. Tosen's gaze grew strained. What? With the blade of his katana resting on his shoulders, Fugaku acknowledged. I admit that there was a time when I believed in something similar to what you believe in now. But then. Tosen said, but then what? To his surprise, Fugaku said, but then, those ideals, coupled with my clan's hatred, were the very things that caused the destruction of my clan. It only caused pain and misery to my own 2 sons, the only 2 survivors of my clan. Go on, Tosen said, his interest suddenly high. And then in my time in Soul Society, I learned that fear is unnecessary in battle as it only brings lack of resolve, a cowardly sense of self-preservation and, ultimately, the deaths of the people that you wish to protect before your own inevitable demise. What did you say? Tosen clenched his left hand into a fist, his teeth clenched in rage. Without fear, there is no sense of justice. The only thing that one needs in battle is to be at peace with oneself, the acceptance of their own mortality, and the determination to do what your own heart feels is right. And my heart is saying to stop Aizen and anyone who takes side with him, you, Tosen. With his left hand, Tosen grasped the hilt of his Zanpakuto and slowly pulled it out of its sheath. You, those who pervert the balance of justice must be eliminated no matter what. You have no fear, Fugaku. That is understandable, but you have reached your limit. You 3 will fail in the end, Tosen, Fugaku said, aiming his sword's point directly at Tosen's heart. Would you like to know why? It's because, unlike you, the other Shinobigamis and I aren't afraid to die if that's what it takes to stop you. If that's the price that we have to pay, then so be it. In order to save Soul Society and what we believe, we're willing to give up our lives. This caused Tosen's eyes to widen. Such a strong will. Fugaku bellowed, this is the end, Tosen, and charged at him. In the interim, still holding Rukia in his arms, Renji skidded to a stop when he noticed some figures moving in from the distance. Is that? Renji narrowed his eyes, trying to identify them. Renji.san. Rukia.san. Oh, it's Inoue and the others, Rukia said, gesturing toward the group. Inoue halted in front of Renji and Rukia while accompanied by Yachiru, Ishida, Chad, Ganju, and Mikizo Aramaki. Rukia glanced at Inoue and asked, "Are any of you hurt?" Inoue gave a headshake. "No, we're all fine." Rukia felt herself plummeting through the air, and her eyes widened in surprise. Renji fell to the ground from exhaustion, but she landed safely and swiftly. Renji-san. Inoue knelt down beside him. "He's out cold, oh no." Rukia let out a sigh. "It's probably from his battle with Ni Sama and carrying me around all of this time. It's my fault." With a grunt, Ganju took hold of Renji and lifted him onto his shoulder. "There we go," Ganju uttered. "We're all ready to go." Before Rukia could complain, Chad grabbed her and carried her in his arms. Rukia exclaimed, Chad, with embarrassment at needing constant carrying. Chad looked at the others and said, "Okay," before nodding, "Let's move." "Wait," exclaimed Mikizo. "We should probably head back now that we've got Rukia-san with us. Who's with me?" "Let's go," he exclaimed, turning around and beginning to march off. "Oi!" Ganju kicked Mikizo in the butt after grabbing him by the back of his uniform. "Don't you even think about it, Shobahige-san." Yachiru concurred. "That's right, Maki, we can't go back now." Mikizo sulked. But Sokyoku Hill was indicated by Ishida. "If you haven't forgotten, Ichigo's still up there, and that Aizen guy might be too." Mikizo's gaze expanded. He was about to say something, but his mouth remained closed. If what we heard about that Aizen guy is true, then Ichigo might be in serious trouble. Ishida gritted his teeth in rage. "How could you?" When he and the others sensed an overwhelming amount of Ryatsu emanating from Sokyoku Hill, Ishida ceased speaking. Chad asked no one in particular, looking shocked. Whose Ryatsu is that?" he asked. "It's obviously not Ichigo's, but..." The group unconsciously took a step back as they watched a huge storm cloud resembling a hurricane start to form while they were still gazing up at Sokyoku Hill. Everyone in Seirei looked up at the sky as the storm cloud started to spread throughout the entire city. With a terrified expression on her face, Inoue said, Rukia-san, what's going on?" Rukia started to realize what was happening, and her eyes widened in shock. Abruptly calm, she blinked and turned to face Inoue and the others. She remarked, "This can only mean one thing." The others, including Inoue, appeared perplexed. Ishida questioned, "What does it mean?" "It means that Naruto, a distant sound, like the roar of a dragon, came from inside the storm clouds, and everyone's head, except Rukia's, snapped towards Sokyoku Hill. Has achieved Bankai. Sokyoku Hill, Soul Society, Seirei. Minato easily avoided his former captain's thrust attack by tilting his head to the side. He rolled onto his hands and kicked Aizen's blade flat with such force that Aizen retreated several feet. Minato swiftly reacted to Aizen slashing at his arms by using his arms to propel himself off the ground and flipping over, landing on his feet. Aizen remained composed while observing his former vice captain's movements. Amazing, the Shinobigamas currently have the upper hand. If we continue in this manner, then... When he looked at Shisui and Naruto, Aizen's eyes met Shisui's, and when he saw Shisui smile, his eyes narrowed. "So, Aizen," Shisui said. "How does it feel to finally be on the verge of defeat?" Aizen merely dismissed the remark and asked his own question in response. "Uchiha Shisui, it's quite obvious that you are not standing there just for show, so tell me this, what have you done to me?" At this, Shisui grinned a little. "Aizen," he uttered gradually, "as my enemy, it would be almost suicidal for me to reveal the secrets behind my abilities, but..." Aizen's eyebrow went up. "But, I will say that your Zanpakuto isn't the only one that can manipulate others." Now, Karasu no Hansha, Shisui's Zanpakuto, possessed three primary skills. The first was Karasu no Tsutia, which Shisui himself activates. It causes everything in the blade and Shisui's field of vision to vanish into an illusion akin to Kyoka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis, but it also allows Shisui to control how his opponent perceives time and space. He could also use his Sharingan to further improve this ability. When the Shikai was released, the second ability, Shin no Hansha, activated on its own initiative and shielded Shisui's mind from all outside forces and manipulation techniques, including Kyoka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis. The drawback of Shisui's third ability, Mure, was that it prevented him from using his Zanpakuto to increase the range of his Karasu no Tsutia while Mure was active. However, Shisui could use Mure to extend his Shin no Hansha ability to anyone nearby whenever he wanted to. Aizen's eyes went wide with surprise. "So he's given me a false impression? to have imposed an illusion upon me that surpasses the strength of my own? With his sword raised for the kill, Aizen suddenly rushed towards the injured Byakuya who was lying on the ground, clenching his teeth. Kuchiki. Taiko, good. Bye. What? When Aizen's attack was abruptly stopped by Naruto, who was staring at him angrily, he appeared shocked. As their blades scraped against one another, Naruto said, "Aizen, you coward," and pushed Aizen back an inch. "You must have no shame if you're willing to attack an unarmed person who can barely stand." Byakuya was stunned by Naruto's actions, but he still had a look on his face as he stared at him. Uzumaki. Fukutaichu. Naruto gave him another look. "What is it?" Calmly, Byakuya questioned. "Why are you protecting me when you despise me so?" Naruto countered the move by swinging his own sword at Aizen after dodging and avoiding his blade. Gazing at Byakuya, Naruto inhaled deeply and said, "It's just something that I learned from my sensei back in the shinobi world. Those who break the rules are scum, but those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. I may see you as someone who's worse than a scum, but you're still a comrade, and more importantly, you're Rukia's older brother, so as far as I'm concerned, I can't, and I won't let Aizen kill you even if I can't stand you." Byakuya appeared astonished. "Uzumaki Naruto is the same as that Kurosaki Ichigo. Our encounters over the last few days were genuinely an effort to save Rukia's life, but he was only acting in accordance with his own instincts from the beginning." Byakuya was startled out of his reverie when Naruto violently pushed Aizen back a few yards. Naruto. When Naruto turned around, Shisui and his father were standing next to him. "Tosen. Shisui. Sensei, get everyone else to stand back," Naruto said softly, bowing his head. "I'm going to finish this battle once and for all." This made Ichigo look irate. "What, Naruto? I know that Byakuya and I might be in a bad state right now, but we can still help you guys fight Aizen." "I know that," Naruto said, looking at him, "but I'm not worried about Aizen hurting you too." Ichigo's gaze expanded. "What do you mean?" Naruto had a serious expression on his face as he looked up at Aizen. "I'm afraid that I don't have enough control over what I'm about to do now, so you guys might get caught in the crossfire." Calmly, Byakuya said, "What do you mean by that, Uzumaki Naruto?" As soon as he heard his son's words, Minato turned to face him. "Naruto," he uttered softly, "have you really achieved Bankai?" Naruto replied with a nod. "I'm sorry for disobeying your orders as you told me not to obtain it yet, but It's all right," Minato said. "You don't have to say anything. I already knew that you would go ahead and do it without my permission, but I'm just glad that you waited as long as you did before going on with your Bankai training. Just be careful, son." Without delay, Shisui and Byakuya vanished as Minato seized Ichigo by his Shiakusho. Aizen looked surprised as Naruto turned to face her and turned off Kurama's shroud. With curiosity, Aizen asked, "Why did you do that?" "I'll activate it again after I activate my newest trump card," he responded. "Don't worry about it." When Aizen understood what Naruto was implying, his eyes widened and he leapt forward to stop him, but it was too late. With a determined expression in his eyes, Naruto gazed at Aizen after unleashing a monstrous level of Ryotsu that startled and overpowered him. Naruto bellowed, "It's time to end this battle, Aizen." With the katana's tip shining in the sunlight, he aimed his blade skyward. Ban. Kai. Minato and the others, including Aizen, noticed that the sky was getting darker as they looked up at it. Over Naruto's head, enormous storm clouds began to form. As the storm clouds gradually moved throughout Seirei, everyone looked up at the sky, curious about what was happening. A tremendous column of water, wind, and lightning descended from the storm above after a loud roar reverberated above the cloud. As the enormous column of elements channeled itself through Naruto's Zanpakuto, ultimately enclosing him until he was invisible from the outside, everyone watched in awe. The column that Naruto's Bankai had formed vanished after a short while, and the enormous storm clouds above began to arrange themselves into a huge maelstrom. Naruto shouted, "Kamikaze no Mi," as he appeared to Aizen after emerging from the scattered column. In addition to a shortened shakudo that was attached to the armor with an extendable rope made of pure lightning, Naruto was dressed in armor made entirely of lightning, just like the one worn by the spirit of Kamikaze. The Uzumaki clan crest, fashioned from black lightning, was displayed on the rear of the armor. Naruto fixed Aizen with a fierce look that was even more solemn than before. "I hope that you're ready, Aizen, because you're about to die on this hill." Aizen. Sama, Jin and Tosen appeared beside him, and Aizen looked to his left and right. Jin watched Naruto's transformation, his seemingly eternal smile widening. Jokingly, my, how scary," he said. "And I thought that you were scary enough without your Bankai." At this, Naruto grinned. "I've had just about enough of your sarcasm," he replied. I'm really going to enjoy putting some real fear into you. Jin started to inquire about this, but he was stopped when he noticed Naruto using his blade to channel his Ryotsu. Aizen and his two subordinates were the targets of Naruto's blade tip, Idai Genso Akari. When a broad beam of what appeared to be water, wind, and lightning erupted from the tip of Naruto's Zanpakuto, Aizen and his two subordinates' eyes widened in shock. So quick, Tosen prepared himself and thought. Boom! The attack destroyed much of the area, and Aizen and the two others barely managed to avoid it. Although they managed to avoid the attack, the powerful shockwave it produced blew them back several meters. When Aizen flew through the air, he narrowed his eyes. This is quite an attack. Zanpakuto, the character created by Uzumaki Naruto, has always had the ability to control wind, lightning, and water, but this ability to control all three simultaneously is new. If he has any more tricks up his sleeve, I will have to back off without the Hogyoku. Shortly after sending Aizen and the others flying, Naruto grabbed his tethered blade and repeatedly threw it at Aizen, reactivating Kurama's shroud. When Ichigo saw this, his eyes grew wide. When my inner hollow fought me, he did exactly this. While hurling his Chikudo at Aizen and his subordinates, Naruto silently used his Hyoka ability. He could imprint a kanji for K's, Reime, and Ormizu on whoever or whatever he struck with the blade thanks to this ability. For a single kanji, he could imprint up to 3 marks. Naruto was able to mark each of them twice by the time Aizen and the others had stabilized. To the surprise of Aizen and the others, Naruto paused his blade throw and raised his gaze to the sky. Curious, Aizen said, "Why stop attacking us, Naruto-kun?" With a sigh, Naruto looked at Aizen. "You should be more patient, Aizen. You're just about to get your answer." Naruto raised his blade and pointed it at the sky after turning to face it once more. From the tip of the blade, a broad beam of wind, water, and lightning erupted, hurtling toward the maelstrom above Naruto. Arashi no Seirei. The roaring of several dragons shook the air itself, making the ground appear to tremble. Ichigo, who was by himself watching the entire battle with Gikuya and the other shinobigamas, was completely taken aback and confused by what he was witnessing. He muttered, "Just what's going on here?" Renji, Rukia, the other members of Ichigo's group, as well as Yachiru, Makizo, and Hanataro, who had joined the group on their way to Sokyoku Hill, suddenly appeared out of nowhere and skidded to a stop when they arrived at Ichigo and the others. Upon seeing the group, Minato narrowed his eyes, paying particular attention to Orihime, Uryu, Chad, Ganju, and Hanataro. These are the other intruders. 4 people and 1 Rukongai resident were prepared to go to such lengths to save a friend, and they even succeeded in persuading Hanataro to assist them. Then Minato grinned at the thought. "I understand why Naruto became interested in them. It seems like something my son would have done on his own," he thought, returning his focus to the battle. Ichigo appeared taken aback upon seeing them. He said, What are you guys doing here?" This question appeared to irritate Ishida. "What are we doing here? We're here to get you out of here obviously, Kurosaki." Ichigo's response was humorous. "Oi, I never asked for you to," he said. Ishida stepped forward with a frown. "What? You?" "I said that I didn't." Ishida turned abruptly, seeing a blonde figure engaged in combat with Aizen and the others. "Hey, Kurosaki, are those 3, who I think they are?" With a sudden seriousness, Ichigo nodded. "Yay, Ishida, if you're thinking that they're the ones responsible for what happened to Rukia, then they are." Standing beside Ishida and Chad, Inoue blinked when she saw the blonde Shinigami. She turned to face Renji and said, "Hey, who is that person that's fighting those 3? "That's Uzumaki Naruto," Renji uttered haltingly. Ishida, Chad, and Inoue appeared astonished. Chad glanced at Rukia below. "Kuchiki-san, who exactly is this Naruto anyways?" Rukia gazed at her vice. "Captain inside. Jushanbantai, Fukutaichu, Uzumaki Naruto, he's my vice. Captain, as well as one of the strongest members of the Godai 13. He's also a close friend of mine, and he's also a former shinobi." Ishida appeared perplexed. "A shinobi? What does that?" A frightened Hanataro interrupted him, gesturing to the enormous whirlpool above. He squeaked, "T. The maelstrom is G. Getting even bigger." Everyone noticed that the storm was getting stronger as they looked up in the direction Hanataro was looking. It had expanded more than 5 times in the last few seconds and had now spread to the 4th districts in each of the 4 Rukongai area regions. "Oi! Look up there," Ganju exclaimed abruptly. "There's something coming out of the sky." Then, as 3 sizable holes appeared in the storm clouds above Naruto, the group looked up at the sky directly above him. The regions that had been swept up by the maelstrom were now suddenly plagued and soaked by torrential rain and wind. After taking a quick look at the sky, Naruto turned to face Aizen and his followers. Arashi no Seirei is my Bankai's most powerful ability. However, it also uses up so much of my Riryoku that if I don't deactivate it in time my Bankai will forcibly deactivate itself, after which point I won't be able to use it until that lost Riryoku is restored after 5 days, Naruto clarified. Ost. Remember to include the backspaces and slashes. Fade to black. From Bleach. Link. www.youtube.com watch. V. WSBV7CJZLKs. It's a big gamble for me to use this attack. This time, however, the roars grew louder and louder until the source of the roars finally appeared from the 3 openings in the storm clouds in the form of 3 enormous dragons, each with glowing red, silted pupils. Naruto stopped just in time as the sound of the roaring dragons returned. 2 of them were made of lightning and wind, respectively, and 1 was made of water. Ishida's eyes widened at the sight of the magnificent beasts, which stunned everyone on the hill. He whispered, "J. Just what the hell are those things?" To no one in particular. Aizen's eyes were wide as she gazed at them in surprise. "This is," Naruto said, "as I was saying, drawing Aizen's attention. As you're going to see, Arashi no Seirei's sheer power justifies the risk, even with its dangers." Naruto's hands, which he used to create the dragon seal, now resembled 2 lightning gauntlets after the lightning from his blade and tether abruptly dissipated and resurfaced around them. Howl, K's no Seirei. The wind dragon suddenly flew at them like a bullet, and Aizen and the other 2 could hardly avoid it as their eyes widened in shock. But sadly for Aizen and his friends, the dragon just swerved and raced back in their direction because Aizen was marked with the K's Hyoka. As he watched them dodge, Naruto exclaimed, "Not so fast! Crash, Mizu no Seirei." To the surprise of the 3, the water dragon joined the attack and raced in their direction. Both dragons slammed into the ground beside them, barely allowing them to avoid them. However, Jin and Tosen were both marked with the Mizu Hyoka, which were now glowing as well, making it much harder to avoid. Now that the 3 were wedged between the 2 dragons, Naruto narrowed his eyes as the creatures lunged toward them. "You guys won't be escaping again. Roar. Reime no Seirei." As he spoke, Aizen and the others were attacked from above by the lightning-shaped dragon. Together, they were able to strike the 3 with a pincer attack, and as a result of the attack, the 3 dragons collided, sending a huge shockwave through the Sokyoku Hill that destroyed the section of the hill where the broken scaffold was located, causing it to collapse and fall to the ground below. The sword reappeared on Naruto's right hand as he switched back to his Shikai and deactivated Arashi no Seirei as the blast faded. The maelstrom vanished as the storm gradually weakened. With a slight grimace, Naruto clenched his hand around his sword. "I would have lost my Bankai for 5 days if I had taken an extra minute to complete this battle." Naruto's focus shifted to Aizen and the others, who had suffered severe injuries in the assault. As a result, it was clear that they could no longer fight. Aizen was so severely wounded that Jin had to support him on his shoulder when Naruto aimed his sword at him. "The fight's over, Aizen. You've lost." Just then, Ichigo, his companions, and the other Shinigamis and Shinobigamas sprang into view and hurried to Naruto and the others' location. Final Ost to Naruto's surprise, despite his severe wounds, Aizen laughed lightly. As Naruto assumed his fighting stance, he narrowed his eyes. "You might have won the battle, but this war is far from over." Naruto started to reply, but before he could finish, a huge square beam appeared around Aizen and his friends. When Naruto realized they were going to flee, he prepared to attack them. A voice behind him said, "Do not attack." Naruto halted and turned to face the captain. Commander behind him. Additionally, he noticed that Yukitake had arrived with the rest of the group, which included Sui, Fung, Unohana, Shunsui, Hitsugaya, Rangaku, and Yoruichi. "Captain. Commander." Naruto cried out. "This is called negation," the captain. Commander clarified. "It's something that Manos is used to rescue some of their own." Naruto turned to look at the Jillians. And anyone who's fought against a Manos knows that once the light descended on Aizen, we could no longer touch him. This caused Naruto to sigh. After glancing at Aizen, the captain, Commander turned to face Naruto. "You still fought well, Uzumaki. Fukutaichu. Thanks to you and the other former shinobi's valiant efforts, you all have managed to stop Aizen from achieving his goals in an injustice that would have put Soul Society in grave danger. This." The captain, Commander heard Aizen laugh lightly and glanced up at him. "How arrogant of you to assume that, Yamamoto Genryusai," Aizen replied. "Uzumaki-kun and the other shinobis have only managed to slow down my plans, and I will eventually succeed in my plans." Naruto surprised everyone by giving Aizen a silly smile, with the exception of the other shinobigamas, of course. Surprisingly, Naruto said, "I don't think so, Aizen," as he reached into his Shiakusho and took something out. "I don't think that you'll get very far without this." Aizen muttered, What?" as he gaped in shock at the object in Naruto's hand, initially unable to understand what it was. It was a tiny, lavender-colored, translucent object that looked a lot like marble. This was so unbelievable that Aizen balled his fists. "Is that the Hogyoku?" he said out loud, his tone composed in spite of the circumstance. Naruto said mockingly, "Oh, so that's the name of this thing?" Aizen glared at Naruto and hissed, "There's no way that you could have known about the Hogyoku. Especially after your actions from our initial confrontation at the Central 46 compound, there's no way." After a brief chuckle, Naruto surprised Aizen and the other Shinigami by bursting into a fit of laughter. "I was only pretending to act like I didn't know what you were after," Naruto chuckled. "I was only angry over you calling Rukia a pawn." Naruto smiled at Aizen and stopped laughing. "Did you really think that the other shinobis and I didn't know what you were after, Aizen-chan? You see, when Rukia first came back from the world of the living, I learned about the Hogyoku being sealed within her because Kurama had sensed a second set of emotions within her. Get it?" Hearing this, Aizen's eyes narrowed. Who believed that giving that blasted Kyuubi the capacity to perceive negative emotions was a smart idea? Anyway, Naruto uttered, "After that, I made a deal with Mayuri Taiko to get the Hogyoku out of Rukia while she had been asleep in the cell at the 6th Division's barracks under my watch in exchange for a certain favor." Naruto shuddered at this. "But then, I did lie to the captain about the true nature of the item, and I've kept the Hogyoku on me since that time." Aizen's eyes widened, blazing with anger, and he clenched his teeth in rage, realizing that Naruto, of all people, had outwitted him. When he reached the summit of the negation, he exclaimed, "You little bastard! I will make you pay for this insult in time, Uzumaki Naruto. You can try to attack Soul Society as much as you want to, but if you could be outsmarted by an idiot like me, then I'm pretty sure that we have nothing to worry about," said Naruto with a smile. This made Aizen smile unpredictably. "We shall see about that." Jin, Tosen, and the other Mainos disappeared into the Garuganta a moment later. This was followed by Naruto approaching the captain, commander, and giving him the Hogyoku. As Yamamoto removed the item from his grasp, Naruto remarked, "I believe it would be best if I gave this to you, Sutaichu." The captain, commander declared, "I will ensure that the Hogyoku is properly concealed so that Aizen will never be able to locate it. Uzumaki Fukutaichu, you fought well, and I thank you." Naruto was about to reply, "It was no big deal," but to everyone's surprise, he fell to the ground instead. Kushina covered Naruto with her hands and began to heal him as Minato and Kushina hurried to their son's side. Minato asked with a worried expression, "Is he okay, Kushina?" Kushina merely turned and smiled at Minato. "Yes," she said, her voice unable to conceal her relief. Observing this, Inoue turned to Rukia. "Say, Kuchiki-san." Rukia looked over at Inoue. "What is it, Inoue? Who are those two people that are with Uzumaki-kun?" she inquired. Rukia grinned as she looked at the three. "They're Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina, the vice captain and the third seed of the 5th Division, and they're also Naruto's parents." This appeared to surprise Inoue and the other Ryokas. Naruto, who had remained conscious, blinked and surveyed the devastation. "Hey, Ichigo, I think that I might have overdone it a bit." Ichigo turned to Naruto with a humorous frown on his face after glancing at the spot where the Sokyoku stand had been. "You think?" In order to recover from overusing his Bankai and Kurama's shroud, Naruto was sent to the Sogo Kyugo Sumesho for a few days following the final battle between him, Aizen, and his two subordinates. After his battle with Aizen, he had suddenly collapsed due to the extreme strain those two things had placed on his body. However, he recovered remarkably quickly because of the tremendous stamina he inherited from his Uzumaki clan lineage, though Naruto had chosen to use both abilities at the same time as a last resort. Due to Yukatake Taiko's temporary illness, Naruto spent the next 2 days leading the 13th Division after he had fully recovered. However, he also had the opportunity to spend some time with Ichigo and his friends, who had spent a few days in Seirei. Although there were still some issues that needed to be resolved, he had also been able to patch things up with Byakuya, who was still healing from his altercation with Ichigo. Unfortunately, Naruto had also discovered that Aizen's actions had resulted in deaths, as the entire Central 46 had been killed. This implied that Yamamoto Genryusai now held complete control over Soul Society. Barracks, Seirei, Soul Society, 13th Division. 5 days following Aizen's treachery, From the 1st Division barracks, Naruto and his captain Yukitake strolled up to the 13th Division barracks and went inside. Naruto appeared taken aback when he noticed Rukia standing close to the doorway with Ichigo and the others. Kion and Sentaro were also present. At the sight of Naruto and Yukitake, Kion and Sentaro leapt to their feet and hurried towards them. Yukitake. Taichu. Kion yelled as she shoved her fellow third-seater out of the way. Oh why, Kion. Sentaro slammed his face into hers and yelled. I saw the Captain first. What? Kion jumped on him, slapping him across the face and pounding him with her fists. You want to say that to my face again, baka? With a sigh, Uryu turned to face Naruto. Don't those two ever stop arguing with each other? As he watched the two battle, Naruto blinked. Nope. Rukia glanced at Naruto and Yukitake after watching the two wrestle with one another. She looked out and said, Where have you and Naruto been, Yukitake? Taiko? The sun is already lowering itself. Oh, that, Yukitake said. Since the 3rd, 5th, 9th divisions had been left without a captain due to Aizen, Jin, and Tosen having defected, the captain. Commander had been busy finding their replacements. I see, Rukia blinked, unable to comprehend her captain's meaning. Reflecting on the meeting he and Naruto had just returned from, Yukitake gazed up at the ceiling. Minato. Fukutaichu and Fugaku. Fukutaichu, the lieutenants of the 5th and 9th divisions, respectively, had both achieved Bankai a long time ago, and with the leadership experience they had from when they were still alive, they were both promoted to the captain positions of their respective divisions through personal recommendations. Also, Rukia cocked her head sideways. Yes, I had recommended Naruto for the captain proficiency test, which is why we were at the 1st Division barracks for so long. Ichigo turned to face Naruto after realizing what was happening. Oh, so you've actually been promoted to captain, Naruto? Naruto cast a sheepish glance down. Well, it's going to be made official the following morning, but... Ichigo blinked. What's up? Well, I'd much rather stay in the 13th division and have Shisui Sensei become to captain, but Shisui Sensei had refused to take the test even though he had met the requirements because he feels that he's not the type to be a leader, but even so, Naruto. After halting his conversation, Naruto turned to face Rukia. She put her arms around him and gave him a gentle hug, causing his eyes to widen in surprise. Other than when Sakura would punch him in the face, Naruto didn't have any girls make that kind of intimate contact with him, so he blushed a little. I'm happy for you, Rukia said without warning. You deserve the promotion, Naruto, and you should accept it proudly. This made Naruto smile. Thank you, Rukia. After finishing Sentaro's beating, Kion rushed to Naruto and bowed deeply. She said, Congratulations, Naruto. Taiko, beaming broadly. I'll miss you a lot, and I. He rushed up to Sentaro, who yelled, No, I'll miss you more, Naruto. Taiko. Kion told Sentaro, Hey, I was talking to him first, Yubaka, while striking Sentaro in the face. As he watched the two battle again, Naruto blinked. They may not even be aware that I will still be able to visit the 13th division, I wonder. Sokyoku Hill, Soul Society, Seirei, after 2 days. A Senkaimon was waiting for Ichigo and his companions when they arrived at Sokyoku Hill with Naruto, Yukitake, Minato, Fugaku, and the other shinobigamas. Ichigo had already received the substitute Shinigami badge from Yukitake. Now, Fugaku wore a long, sleeved captain's haori, while Naruto and his father wore a sleeveless one. Shisui and Kushina were now wearing the vice captain armbands after being elevated to the position of vice captain. There were also a few of the other captains. As they said goodbye to one another, Ichigo and Rukia exchanged glances. Well, CYA, Ichigo said, grinning at her. Yay, Rukia smiled slightly at him. See you later. Naruto approached Ichigo as he turned to face him. Ichigo said, Naruto, take care of Rukia for me. Of course I will. Naruto grinned in response. Ichigo turned around and went into the Senkaimon with his friends after they bumped fists. Ichigo said, Until we meet again, Naruto, and then he vanished. Naruto stood motionless, staring at the gate after the Senkaimon closed. Ichigo and I may have to meet up sooner than anticipated. Rukia yelled, Naruto, as she turned to leave. Yay, I'm coming, Naruto replied, sprinting after her. Karakura Town, Karakura High School, after 6 months. Weary, Ichigo collapsed on his seat and yawned. Sitting beside him, Rukia slapped him across the head and blinked. Ichigo glared at her and said, Hey, what was that for? Smelling, pay attention, baka, Rukia, who had returned to her responsibilities as Karakura Town's protector a few weeks earlier, said, "High school's important at your age, you know." Ichigo picked up his pencil for today's test and rolled his eyes. At that point, Ichigo's teacher entered the room and slapped a ruler across her palm. "Okay everyone," she mentioned. "Does everyone have a pencil ready?" "Yes." "Okay, good." She nodded after taking a quick look around the room. "Beg." "Oh why, Ichigo." When Ichigo heard someone outside the school calling for him, he turned around, as did his teacher and fellow students. Ichigo blinked. "Huh? Hurry up and come out before I go in there and start looking for you, Ichigo." "You've got 5 minutes," said the voice. Uryu's eyes narrowed. "I know that voice," Ichigo's teacher, Ochi Misato, and everyone else in the room turned to face Ichigo. "Hey Kurosaki, do you know that?" Before she could finish, Ichigo leapt from his chair and ran out of the classroom. Ichigo shouted, "Just a relative," and rushed out of the room. The teacher of Ichigo blinked. "Your relative?" A blonde wearing black pants and an orange t-shirt stood beneath a tree outside the school. "Ichigo!" the figure exclaimed, putting his hands over his mouth. "Hey Ichigoo." A sigh was heard behind the figure, followed by a calm, stoic male voice. "Do you really think that this Ichigo character will come out if you keep yelling for him?" The blonde figure halted his yelling and pivoted to confront the figure behind him. "Of course he will," he answered back. "I know that Ichigo will come out. There's your proof right in front of you." The second figure blinked in surprise as he saw a tall, orange-haired figure approaching them as he turned to see where the blonde was pointing. When the blonde-haired figure saw him, he sang, "There he is, Ichigoo." Ichigo charged at the figure, head bowed, and scowled at him. "Have you lost your goddamned mind, Naruto?" he roared, charging at him with fury. Without even glancing, Naruto easily avoided Ichigo's attack while gazing boredly at the school building. Ichigo slammed into the tree Naruto was hiding beneath and leapt to his feet, his face red. "So is that how you greet the guy who helped you to control your inner hollow and taught you to control Ryotsu enough so that you could place your Zanpakuto in a sealed state?" asked Naruto with a wry smile. Since Ichigo's constant released Shikai was causing the number of hollows and the incidents associated with them to steadily rise, Naruto had come to Karakura Town 2 months after Ichigo had returned home and, with the captain commander's consent, had taught Ichigo how to control his inner hollow, which had almost exploded multiple times before. He had also taught Ichigo how to put his Zanpakuto in a sealed state. Despite this, Ichigo was still furious and shook Naruto with his fist. "It is when that same guy makes a huge ruckus in front of my friends in order to get my attention." The voice from earlier coughed, drawing both teenagers' attention before they could continue their argument. "Naruto, please remember that we have come for something other than a fistfight." Rukia now showed up on the scene. She appeared taken aback by Naruto's look. Naruto. What are you doing here?" "Hold on." Rukia sensed something close by, and her eyes widened. Someone is on the opposite side of the tree. The moment she recognized the person's Ryotsu, she commanded, "You, come out of there now." With a sigh, the figure emerged from behind the tree to reveal himself to Rukia and Ichigo. The black hair of the figure was tied down to his shoulder blades in a low ponytail. He was dressed in gray trousers and a dark blue shirt. His red eyes, each containing 3 tomos, and the tear troughs beneath them were his most distinctive features. When Ichigo saw the figure, his eyes grew wide. The Sharingan. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the figure, clearing his throat. Slowly, "Are you, a Uchiha?" he inquired. This was confirmed by the figure's nod. "My name is Uchiha Itachi." "I'm Kurosaki Ichigo," Ichigo informed them. "I think that I remember that name. This guy acts a lot like Gikuya." Ichigo had learned a lot from the other Uchihas because Naruto was unwilling to talk about Itachi's situation and his actions. Ichigo questioned, "Are you a Shinigami now as well?" "Yes," Itachi said. Naruto clarified, Itachi had passed away a little more than a year ago. I won't go into the details, but he had graduated from the Shino Academy just a week before Rukia had returned to Karakura Town, and he's now my vice captain. Kira Izuru was demoted to the 3rd seat. I tried to get him into the Gotei 13 without getting into the academy first because of the approaching conflict with Aizen and his lackeys, but the other captains rejected this, and Rukia realized that something serious was happening and asked, "But why are you and this Itachi here in the first place?" Just before Ichigo looked at Naruto, his expression abruptly became solemn as he suddenly realized what was happening. "Is something happening in the shinobi world, Naruto?" Itachi responded to this query. "Something is going to happen very soon, and we know for a fact that Aizen is getting involved in it." Ichigo's eyes narrowed. Naruto, did you come to ask for my help by any chance? After a moment, Naruto nodded. I need someone that I can trust, but I'll understand if you can't. Ichigo interrupted him by shaking his head. I'll do it. Naruto stared in shock at him. Huh, you're my friend, Ichigo declared plainly. Also, after all the time you had taken to train me, it's the least that I could do. I see, when Ichigo said, but I do have two conditions. First, I want to say bye to my friends as I'm sure that this journey's going to take a while, and secondly, you have to tell me what the problem is that you need my help with. Even though he had intended to give Ichigo an explanation of the situation whether or not he requested one, Naruto nodded. Agreed, but the explanation will have to wait until we get to Seireiti as some details have to be provided with others. Ichigo indicated that he understood by nodding. Blinking, Itachi turned to walk away. We will be waiting for you at Urahara Kazuki's shop, said the man. Itachi had met Urahara just before he and Naruto arrived at Ichigo's high school, and Naruto had met Urahara on his first visit to Karakura town. Ichigo and Rukia were left to consider the situation alone as Naruto and Itachi left for Urahara's shop. Soul Society, Seireiti. As he, Naruto, and Itachi reached Seireiti, Ichigo surveyed the area. Ichigo also had his brand new Zanpakuto sealed. With the exception of a silver tsuba and pommel with a black hilt, it now resembled his original oversized Zanpakuto. Additionally, Ichigo's chest now had a red strap that resembled a rosary attached to the brown sheath. A few minutes later, the three of them walked into the commander's office and started to explain the situation to Ichigo. Welcome Kurosaki Ichigo, Uzumaki, Taiko, Itachi. Fukutaicho, Yamamoto said. What's up, Gramps? Ichigo sniffed. It appears that Aizen has been sighted in the shinobi world and we have also been informed that he had been trying to create an alliance with a group known as the Akatsuki since he had left Soul Society with Ichimaru and Tosen, Yamamoto stated. Ichigo scratched his head, thinking, wait, instead, so why are these Akatsuki guys so dangerous? It seems that they are after a group of beasts known as Bijus, excluding your Biju of course, Uzumaki. Taiko, Yamamoto said. Since he died, he cannot be revived back into that world. Itachi took over at this point. I was concerned about the danger that the group posed to Konoha, so I had joined the Akatsuki in order to keep an eye on them and to stall them for as long as I was able to. Shortly before my death, however, I was able to learn that the Akatsuki had planned to make their move the following year, and that time is now approaching fast. While the 2nd Division and the Onmitsukido are the ones with sole jurisdiction over the shinobi world, the possibility of Aizen getting involved in acquiring the other Bijus as a result, we can no longer allow just a single division to handle the situation in hand, stated the commander. As a result of this situation, Sui, Feng, Taiko and you, Uzumaki, Taiko, will lead a 5-man team to the shinobi world to eliminate the Akatsuki before they can acquire the Biju. You should also note that Hitsugaya, Taiko and Aburai, Fukutaichu have volunteered to join the mission. Ichigo considered this. Su, are we going to be like asking for help from Konoha as well? This question was answered by Soifun, who had been standing in the rear of the room. According to her response, that's a negative. While they can see us Shinigamis, they still do not know of our existence, and unless Aizen directly targets the shinobi world, it will stay this way. Since we have to briefly go to Konoha regardless of that matter, Uzumaki, Taiko will be going there with his identity concealed. I see, Ichigo answered, and the commander said, are there any questions? He remarked, very well then. All 5 members of the team are to make preparations for the journey. You shall all be departing for the shinobi world in exactly 5 hours. Everyone nodded and made their way to the door. Ichigo went with Naruto and Itachi to grab a few items for the trip, while the other members went to their respective division barracks. Naruto paused and turned to Itachi as he and the others entered the 3rd Division barracks. Itachi. You'll be taking charge of the 3rd Division while I'm gone, so don't go and screw this up, okay? Itachi's face remained as blank as ever as he blinked. You mean like the time you blew up the SRDI? Naruto exclaimed, Oi, as they arrived at his office. Shut it. Naruto opened his office door, and after they entered, Itachi surveyed the somewhat roomy space, analyzing and absorbing all of its features. Aside from the shelves and cabinets crammed with papers and documents, the room measured roughly 5 by 5 feet. On the other side of the room was a desk that had 3 picture frames and a lamp. Itachi's attention was drawn to the 3 images. He was taken aback by what he saw when he approached the desk. Naruto and his parents were shown in the leftmost picture, followed by Naruto, Yukataki, Kion, Sentaro, and Rukia in the middle, and Naruto with Team 7 in the rightmost picture. Ichigo leaned over Itachi to review the photos and said, "Wow, say, aren't you worried that we might blow your cover, Naruto?" Naruto approached a cabinet and opened it, searching through the contents of the drawer. "Well, that's the reason why these were made for me," he responded. Naruto spun around to confront Ichigo, who was wearing a mask and a black hooded cloak over his uniform. Ichigo saw that it suppressed all but a fifth of his Ryotsu, and it was big enough to cover his entire body. In addition to having two narrow eyehole slits, the white mask he wore featured two vertical blue stripes that extended past each slit. Ichigo was slightly taken aback to see that Naruto's once blonde hair had turned jet black. "So, does that mask do anything?" "Yay, it does," said Naruto. He took a second cloak from the cabinet and threw it to Ichigo after saying, "This mask projects an illusionary Kido. Urahara Kazuki made this for me around the time that I was training you. Here, put this on." Ichigo blinked. "Huh? Why'd I have to wear one?" "Don't worry," Naruto reassured him. "The cloak is only to suppress your Ryotsu. If we don't, then your Ryotsu could draw unnecessary attention from the Konoha nins, as they're always wary of outsiders." Ichigo complained, all right, as he pulled on the cloak. Naruto said, "Oh, stop grumbling," with a sour tone. "Soifun, Toshiro, and Renji all have to wear one as well." Then Naruto looked at Itachi. "Okay, Itachi. Good luck with everything, and..." As Itachi said, "Let me give you one last word of warning," Naruto was stopped. Sasuke gave Sasuke my eyes before I died, so he now possesses the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. If you do go to Konoha, be careful with him." With a serious expression on his face, Naruto nodded. "I know." Anyways, Naruto added, casting a sidelong glance at Ichigo. "Ichigo, it's time to leave." Ichigo responded, "Got it," extending his arms and legs. "Let's go." With that, Itachi was left alone as he and Naruto Flash left for the 2nd Division barracks. Barracks of the 2nd Division, Seirei, Soul Society. Ichigo, Naruto, and Soifun were waiting outside near the wooded area close to the 2nd Division barracks when he looked up impatiently. "Geez," Ichigo sighed. "Where are those two?" In addition to wearing a mask that resembled Naruto's but did not project an illusionary Kido, Soifun was also dressed in a black cloak that was somewhat smaller than the ones worn by Ichigo and Naruto. Ichigo said, "Sue, for the 10th time that day. Why is Soifun wearing a mask if it doesn't do anything?" "Oh, that," Naruto uttered. "Well, due to various assassinations of certain high-leveled shinobis learning a bit too much about spiritual related matters, Soifun has quite the reputation in the shinobi world, which is why her identity needs to be concealed." Ichigo appeared taken aback by this. "Wow, really? Oi, Ichigo." When Ichigo and the others turned around, they saw Hitsugaya and Renji sprinting in their direction. Ichigo shouted, "Hey, Renji," and waved his hands at them. When they reached the location where Ichigo and the others were waiting, Ichigo noticed that they were all dressed in the same black cloaks. "Well, that took long enough," Ichigo remarked, giving Renji a humorous glare. Bewildered, Renji blinked. "What?" he asked, glancing first at Ichigo and then at Hitsugaya. "Wait, what do you mean, that took long enough? We were the furthest away, Baka." Yay, whatever," Ichigo said, dismissing him. "Of course Bakas use stupid excuses, Baka." "Huh?" Renji asked, leaning over and pressing his face against Ichigo's. "You wanna say something, Shinigami, Daiko?" This caused Ichigo's face to flush. "Oh yay. Well, I may be a Shinigami, Daiko, but I can still kick your ass, Baka," he grumbled. "You wanna try?" Renji exclaimed. Ichigo reached behind his back and took his Zanpakuto's hilt. "Let's do it, Baka. I'll kick your..." Thud. Naruto slammed both of their heads together, rubbing them together while glaring at one another, causing Ichigo and Renji to fall to the ground. Naruto yelled, "Stop arguing, you Bakas," with rage. "If you guys didn't notice, we're about to go on a freaking mission here." Hitsugaya pinched the bridge of his nose in frustration and sighed. He turned to Naruto, who was standing above the unruly pair, and said, "Those Bakas." He said, "My apologies, Uzumaki. Taiko, it seems that we kept you guys waiting for quite some time." Naruto dismissed his apology with a wave. It's nothing," he said. When Soifun said, "If you guys are done arguing, please look over here," they turned to face him. She raised her hand and snapped her fingers, causing the clearing to reverberate as she caught everyone's attention. Ichigo watched in wonder as the double doors of a huge red torii gate slowly creaked open in front of the group. This gate is the official portal to the shinobi world. Soifin clarified. Since the shinobi world is a completely world from the world of the living, it's only natural that there's a different form of the usual Senkaimon, and anyone who's either a former shinobi or a member of the Onmitsukido and the 2nd Division would have knowledge of how to use this gate. She then added, now, be careful once we enter the shinobi world, turning to face Ichigo. The Akatsuki members that we're supposedly hunting are extremely dangerous S-rank nuke nins, but we might need to fight against shinobis from the other shinobi villages that we're forbidden to kill under any circumstances. Soifin turned to the Senkaimon and signaled for everyone to follow her after warning them all. Pulling up their hoods, she and Naruto, the only mask-wearing members of the group, entered the Senkaimon gate. The shinobi world, the Valley of the End, after a minute. As they entered the shinobi world, Naruto and the others took in their surroundings. Large masses of rocks formed into improvised mountains essentially made up the area surrounding them. There was a large body of water in the center of the 2 mountains, and a waterfall with 2 rock-carved figures standing on either side of it was located right in front of the valley. With his bangs swept to the side and concealing one eye, the figure on the left had long, spiky hair. His right hand was clasped against his sword's hilt, and he was dressed in a traditional samurai amur. The person on the right wore a headband around his forehead and had long, straight hair. Additionally, he wore armor resembling that of a samurai, and both figures had their left hands raised, with the middle and index fingers facing up and the remaining fingers balled into fists. Renji observed the surroundings while scratching his chin. So what exactly is this place, Uzumaki? Taiko. This is the Valley of the End, Naruto said, taking a deep breath of the clean air and closing his eyes. A long time ago, there was a fierce battle between the 2 legendary shinobis Uchiha Madara and Hashirama Senju. Their fight was so fierce and devastating that their battle left a giant scar on the land. This place. Toshiro, Ichigo, and Renji appeared taken aback. Wow, Ichigo stammered. That sounds intense. Soifin caught Toshiro's attention. Is this true, Soifin? Taiko? Soifin replied with a nod. It is. I actually witnessed the battle myself with my own 2 eyes. Uchiha Madara and Hashirama Senju. Their powers are absolutely frightening. Anyways, the Onmitsukido built a hideout a few miles south of the valley, so we'll rest there for the night. Ichigo's eyes narrowed as he fixed Naruto, observing that he was looking directly at the middle of the valley. Observing this as well, Soifin approached Naruto and placed a hand on his shoulder. She said, "Are you alright, Naruto?" with an unexpectedly sincere tone of worry. Naruto let out a sigh. Yay, Ichigo blinked, his expression bewildered. What did Soifin mean by that, Naruto? Naruto's eyes were filled with a fierce light as he turned to face Ichigo. This was where I fought my friend Sasuke before I died. He had just betrayed the village in order to join this guy named Orochimaru, an extremely powerful shinobi who wanted to take control of Sasuke's body for his Sharingan. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen, so we ended up fighting it out. At the final moment of our fight, I used Kurama's chakra to create an enhanced version of my most powerful jutsu, Rasengan, while Sasuke used the power of the curse mark that Orochimaru had given him to create an enhanced version of his most powerful jutsu, Chidori. Our jutsus collided, and the result of it is what you see here, the rocks that were missing from each of their legs. Naruto went on. Sasuke ended up piercing me through the chest. As I fell into the water, I found out that I was paralyzed by the electricity from his attack, so I couldn't move my body. It was then that I realized that I was going to die. I just hope that Sasuke and the others are okay. Releasing himself from the memories of his last battle, Naruto looked up at Ichigo and the others. Anyways, we should go to the hideout and rest for a bit. Ichigo gave a nod. Yay, let's go.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.